6 months after Overture. Extermination Day. The 666 news jingle cut through hell's smog-choked airways at precisely 6 in the morning. Katie Killjoy's face filled every broadcast screen across the Pride Ring, her smile sharp enough to gut a sinner. Good morning, degenerates. Today's forecast calls for scattered screaming, with a chance of permanent death. That's right, folks. Heaven's annual cleanse is back, and this time, they mean business. The camera panned to Tom Trench, who adjusted his gas mask nervously. 6 months, Katie. They cut the waiting period in half. Because we're just that special, Tom. Katie's laugh could strip paint. Our field teams report exorcists descending in force. Sinners are advised to find shelter grovel appropriately, and remember Hellborn get a pass. But if you've got a record upstairs, you're fair game. The broadcast cut to aerial footage. Golden figures dropped through the red sky like falling stars, their wings catching the eternal firelight. They moved with military precision, sweeping through the pentagram's twisted streets in grid patterns. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Charlie Morningstar stood in the Hazbin hotel lobby, watching the screens with her fists clenched. The newsfeed showed a sinner trying to outrun 3 exorcists. He didn't make it past the intersection. Every year, she whispered. Every single year, and nothing changes. Baggy appeared at her shoulder spear already in hand. The shelters are opening. We should move the staff to the reinforced basement. We're not hiding. Charlie turned from the screen. We're going out there. Charlie, to help people find shelter, Vaggie, not to fight, just to get them somewhere safe. Angel Dust sprawled across the bar, watching the chaos through the windows. Babe, hate to break it to you, but safe ain't really on the menu today. Husk poured himself something that might have been whiskey. Might have been gasoline. Hard to tell in hell. Kid's got a point. Extermination isn't a negotiation. Then we make it quick. Charlie grabbed her coat. Vaggie, Angel, you're with me. Husk, keep the hotel locked down. Nifty, on it. The Cyclops maid zipped past, already barricading windows, with furniture that seemed to move on its own. Serpentius slithered from his workshop, goggles askew. Should I ready the John ship? No ships, no fights. Just get people to the underground shelters. Charlie headed for the door, then paused. Where's Alastair? Where he always is during interesting times. Husk's tone carried its usual bitter edge. Watching. The streets of the Pride Ring had transformed into a hunting ground. Sinners ran in every direction, their panic creating a chaotic tide of bodies. Some made for the old subway tunnels. Others tried to hide in buildings that offered no real protection. A few foolish souls attempted to fight back, wielding whatever weapons they could grab. The exorcists cut through them like wheat. Charlie's group moved against the flow, directing stragglers toward the nearest shelter entrance. Vaggie kept her spear ready, but hadn't needed to use it. The angels weren't targeting Hellborn, and Charlie's heritage bought them a bubble of safety. This way, quickly. Charlie ushered a cluster of imps toward a reinforced door. Stay underground until you hear the all clear. Angel Dust grabbed a sinner who'd frozen in terror. Move it, Toots. Standing still just makes their job easier. The sky tore open. Not metaphorically. The air above the Pride Ring rippled like water disturbed by a stone, and reality bent sideways. The distortion spread in concentric circles, each wave carrying a low hum that made teeth ache and bones vibrate. Every screen in hell went to static. Katie Killjoy's voice cut out mid-sentence. The exorcists paused in their systematic purge heads, tilting toward the anomaly. Even the sinners stopped running, transfixed by something that shouldn't exist in a realm already divorced from natural law. The distortion stabilized. Where empty air had been, a structure now stood. It rose from the cracked streets like a tombstone, massive and impossibly detailed. Gothic architecture married to something older, something that predated Hell's twisted aesthetic. Obsidian walls caught the firelight and swallowed it. Towers climbed toward the red sky, their peaks wreathed in mist that had no business existing in Hell's arid atmosphere. The great tomb of Nazarick had arrived. Charlie stared at the monument. What is that? Nothing good. Vaggy's grip tightened on her spear. That's not hell. That's not heaven. That's something else entirely. Angel finished his usual bravado absent. The structure occupied several city blocks, displacing buildings and streets without destroying them. They simply ceased to exist where Nazarick stood. The tomb's presence created a dead zone around its perimeter, a space where Hell's normal rules seemed uncertain. Navigation went haywire. Sinners trying to run past the anomaly found their paths curving back on themselves. Sound behaved strangely near the walls, arriving delayed or from impossible directions. 3 exorcists flew reconnaissance patterns around the perimeter and had to abort when their formation kept drifting off course. From somewhere high above, Adam's voice boomed across the Pride Ring. All units mark that position. Unknown structure, unknown origin. Maintain purge operations. We'll deal with that after. A door opened. Not the massive main gates, but a smaller entrance at ground level. Warm light spilled onto Hell's streets, impossibly inviting. The opening stood perhaps 10 feet tall, wide enough for several people to pass through simultaneously. A figure appeared in the doorway. Humanoid, but clearly undead, desiccated flesh, barely clinging to bones, dressed in what might have been servant's livery centuries ago. Its empty eye sockets surveyed the chaos beyond, with something that might have been mild disapproval. When it spoke, the voice carried clearly, despite the screaming and distant explosions. This facility is now offering temporary refuge, in accordance with established protocols. All entities seeking shelter from external hostilities may enter. Terms and conditions apply. The undead servant stepped aside, gesturing to the lit corridor beyond. Charlie blinked. Did that thing just offer shelter? During an extermination? Vaggy's eyes narrowed. That's either the best timing in history or the worst trap I have ever seen. A group of sinners nearby had already made their decision. They bolted for the entrance, shoving each other aside in their desperation. The undead servant made no move to stop them. It simply watched as they flooded past, then continued its announcement. Refuge seekers are reminded that the following regulations apply within these walls. No destruction of property, no theft of resources, no unauthorized access to restricted areas, and no violent action against facility occupants or other refugees. Violations will result in immediate termination of refuge status and appropriate corrective measures. Corrective measures, Angel muttered. Yeah, that ain't ominous at all. More sinners rushed for the door. Word spread fast in Hell. Someone was offering protection, and that someone wasn't asking questions. Within minutes, a flood of desperate souls converged on Nazarick's entrance. Charlie watched them go, her expression torn. We can't just let them walk into something we don't understand. We also can't stop them. Vaggy pointed at the growing crowd. Look at them, Charlie. They're going to die out here. At least in there, they've got a chance. A chance at what? Vaggy didn't answer. The decision made itself. An exorcist dove toward a cluster of sinners 50 yards from Nazarick's entrance, angelic weapon raised. The sinners scattered, running for the only protection available, the mysterious tomb that had promised refuge. Charlie ran with them. "Charlie, wait!" Vaggie sprinted after her, Angel cursing as he followed. They hit the entrance in a wave of bodies carried by momentum and shared terror. The undead servant tracked their movement with its hollow gaze, but made no attempt to interfere. Charlie caught a glimpse of its face as she passed, expressionless, patient, completely unbothered by the chaos. The interior corridor stretched ahead, lit by torches that burned with steady white flame. The walls were smooth stone, unmarked by graffiti or decay. The temperature dropped 20 degrees the moment they crossed the threshold, a jarring contrast to hell's perpetual heat. Behind them, the door remained open. More refugees poured through, their panicked gasps echoing off the corridor walls. Then, with a sound like a bank vault, sealing, the door closed. Not slammed, not crashed shut. Simply closed, smooth and final. The crowd's momentum faltered. Sinners stumbled to a halt, looking back at the sealed entrance. Someone tried the handle, it didn't budge. Another pounded on the door, producing only dull thuds that died without echo. Charlie pushed through to the front of the group. "Hey, we need that door open. There are still people outside." The undead servant had vanished. In its place stood a different figure, female, dressed in an impeccable maid uniform, her appearance almost human, except for the silver hair that moved independent of any breeze. She smiled, pleasant and empty. "Welcome to the great tomb of Nazarick. I am Uri Alpha, head of the Pleiades Battlemaids. You have been granted temporary refuge in the outer corridors pending situation assessment. Please proceed forward in an orderly fashion. Running is not permitted. Loud voices are not permitted. Deviation from marked paths is not permitted." "Listen, lady," Angel started. "Violations will result in corrective action." Yuri's smile never wavered. "Please proceed forward." The corridor behind her branched in 3 directions, each path marked by subtle glowing lines on the floor. The refugees hesitated, caught between the sealed door and the unknown ahead. Vaggie stepped closer to Charlie, voice low. "This is wrong. This whole thing is wrong." "I know." Charlie stared at Uri Alpha, trying to read something, anything, in that perfect professional expression. "But we're already inside." "Exactly my point." Above them, beyond the tomb's stone ceiling, the sounds of extermination continued. Screams, explosions, the whistle of angelic weapons cutting air. But inside Nazarick, everything was quiet, except for the refugees' frightened breathing. Uri gestured to the leftmost corridor. "This way, please. Refreshments and orientation materials are available in the assembly area." "We're not staying," Charlie said. "We just need shelter until the extermination ends. Then we're leaving." "Of course." Yuri's tone suggested she was agreeing to a request for tea. "All refuge status is temporary pending completion of external hostilities. Now, if you would please proceed." The tomb shook. Not violently, just a single tremor like a giant turning in its sleep. The torches flickered. Dust that had no business existing in this pristine corridor drifted from the ceiling. Yuri's head tilted fractionally. "It appears external forces are attempting unauthorized entry." "How unfortunate." "The exorcists," Vaggie said. "They're coming in." "Incorrect. They are attempting to enter. The tomb is now processing their request. According to standard protocols." Uri clasped her hands behind her back. "Please proceed to the assembly area. The situation will be resolved momentarily." Charlie looked at the sealed door, the branching corridors, the impossibly calm maid who spoke of violence like it was a scheduling conflict. Every instinct screamed that they'd made a terrible mistake, but the alternative was outside those walls, where heaven's annual purge continued without mercy. She took the first step into the corridor. The others followed, refugees and Hazbin hotel staff alike, walking deeper into something that called itself sanctuary, but felt like a different kind of trap entirely. Behind them, far above, in hell's red sky, Adam saw the tomb's door seal shut, with over 100 sinners inside. He saw the golden shimmer of exorcist wings reflecting off those obsidian walls, and he made a decision that would prove catastrophic. All units knew priority target. That structure just harbored enemies during active purge operations. We're going in. Lute appeared at his shoulder, her expression hard. Sir, we don't know what that thing is. Protocol says anything that shelters sinners during extermination is hostile. Adam's hand went to his weapon. Light it up. The first wave of exorcists descended toward Nazarick's walls, ready to breach whatever defense this anomaly thought it could mount. The tomb waited patient and ancient. Deep within its halls, systems that hadn't activated in years began their startup sequences. Defenses mapped entry points, guardians received silent alerts. And in the throne room, at Nazarick's heart, seated upon a chair carved from darkness itself, Ainz' Ooal gown opened his eyes. The game had begun. The assembly area existed in defiance of spatial logic. Charlie counted 3 hallways leading into the chamber, but the room's dimensions suggested at least 6 entry points. The ceiling vanished into shadow despite the steady illumination from wall-mounted crystals. Temperature remained constant, cool, dry, sterile, nothing like hell's oppressive heat. Approximately 80 sinners huddled in loose clusters, their voices echoing strangely off walls that seemed to absorb and redirect sound at random. A few brave souls tested the perimeter, finding only smooth stone. No windows, no obvious exits beyond the passages they'd entered through. Yuri Alpha stood near the room's center, hands folded, expression pleasant. 2 other maids flanked her, one with golden hair and an unsettling smile. Another shorter, with expressionless features and what appeared to be a firearm holstered at her waist. Refreshments are available at the designated stations. Yuri gestured to tables that definitely hadn't been there 30 seconds ago. Please help yourselves while orientation materials are prepared. Yeah, I'm good on the mystery punch, thanks. Angel eyed the tables like they might bite, which given current circumstances seemed reasonable. Vaggie kept her back to the wall, scanning for threats. Old habits from her exorcist days: always map the exits, always identify the strongest opponent, always position yourself between danger and what you're protecting. Right now, that meant staying between Charlie and literally everything else in this place. We need information. Charlie approached Yuri with the kind of determined optimism that had gotten her into trouble more times than Vaggie could count. What is this place, who built it, and why offer shelter during an extermination? The great tomb of Nazarick operates according to established protocols. Yuri's answer had the quality of a recording, smooth and uninflected. Refuge requests during external hostilities trigger automatic response parameters. You are currently in Buffer Zone 7, pending threat assessment and resource allocation. That's not an answer. It is the only answer available at your current clearance level. Charlie's eye twitched. Vaggie recognized the warning signs. Her girlfriend was about 5 seconds from doing something regrettably honest. Listen here, Angel started. The tomb shook again, harder this time. Dust rained from the impossible ceiling. Several sinners screamed, pressing themselves against walls that offered no real protection. Yuri tilted her head, receiving information through channels none of them could perceive. External forces have initiated breach attempts. 4 entry points targeted. Defensive systems activating. Please remain calm. Calm. A sinner near the back, some businessman type who'd probably been important before hell pushed forward. Those are angels out there. They'll tear through whatever defenses you've got and kill us all. Incorrect. Yuri's smile never wavered. Angelic weaponry operates on specific metaphysical principles. This facility does not recognize those principles as authoritative. Silence blanketed the chamber. The hell does that mean? Angel finally asked. It means... A new voice cut through the confusion, smooth and carrying an undertone of something vast. That heaven's rules don't apply here. Demiurge entered through a passage that opened silently, his appearance drawing immediate attention. Humanoid, but clearly inhuman, sharp features, calculating eyes movements that suggested coiled intelligence rather than physical threat. He wore what might pass as formal attire in some dimension, where business suits doubled as battle armor. The temperature in the room dropped another 5 degrees. Demiurge Sama. Yuri bowed precisely 30 degrees. The refugees are assembled as requested. Excellent work, Yuri. Demiurge's gaze swept the crowd, and Charlie felt the weight of that attention like pressure against her skin. Welcome, temporary guests. I am Demiurge, Administrator of Strategic Operations for the Great Tomb of Nazarick. You have been granted provisional sanctuary. I'm here to clarify what that means. It means you're using us as bait. Vaggy's accusation landed flat in the sterile air. Incorrect. Using you as bait would imply we need to attract external forces. They're already attempting entry. Demiurge produced a clipboard from nowhere, scanning its contents with professional disinterest. No, you're simply incidental benefits to a larger data-gathering operation. Data gathering? Charlie repeated slowly. Heaven conducts annual purges of hell's sinner population. This is the first time we've observed the process directly. Your presence provides useful behavioral samples, both yours and your pursuers. The information will be valuable for future strategic planning. The businessman sinner laughed high and cracking. You're studying us. We're about to die, and you're taking notes. You're substantially safer here than outside. Demiurge made a notation on his clipboard. External mortality rate during extermination averages 63% of sinner population. Internal mortality rate within Nazarick is currently 0. Statistically, you made the correct choice. For now, Vaggy said. For now. Demiurge agreed, his smile suggesting he appreciated her pragmatism. Which brings us to the terms of your sanctuary. He snapped his fingers. The clipboard vanished, replaced by a floating projection text, written in languages that shouldn't exist, simultaneously readable and alien. The words rearranged themselves, settling into something approaching English. Refuge Protocol Section 7, Subsection 3. Demiurge read aloud, though the projection spoke for itself. All entities granted temporary sanctuary agree to the following. 1. No hostile action against Nazarick personnel or infrastructure. 2. No unauthorized access to restricted areas. 3. Compliance with all lawful instructions from designated authorities. 4. No attempt to subvert, corrupt, or otherwise interfere with tomb systems or inhabitants. And if we violate these terms, Charlie kept her voice level. Sanctuary status is revoked. You are relocated to an appropriate holding area pending final disposition. Demiurge's tone suggested he was discussing lunch options. Violations involving violence or sabotage result in immediate corrective action. Severity of correction scales with severity of violation. Angel raised one hand lazily. Define corrective action. Deterrence through demonstrable consequence. Would you like a practical demonstration? I'm good. Wise. Demiurge's attention shifted to Charlie, recognizing something in her bearing. "You're Hellborn. Royal lineage, if I'm reading the resonance correctly. This raises interesting questions about jurisdiction, but for present purposes, you fall under the same protocols as your companions. I didn't come here to hide behind diplomatic immunity." Charlie stepped forward, aware of Vaggie tensing beside her. "I came here because people needed shelter. But I'm not going to stand by while you treat them like lab rats. Then stand by while we protect them from immediate extermination. Motivations are irrelevant to outcomes." Demiurge consulted his clipboard again. When had it returned? "Your group's designation is Refugee Cluster 12. You'll remain in this buffer zone until external hostilities conclude. Estimated duration, 4 to 6 hours." "Hours?" The businessman center's voice climbed toward hysteria. "Exterminations last all day." Previous exterminations operated under different conditions. This one has encountered an obstacle. Demiurge's expression suggested mild satisfaction. "Heaven is about to learn an important lesson about assumed authority." The tomb shook for a third time. But this tremor carried different qualities, rhythmic pulsing like a heartbeat activating after long dormancy. Yuri received another silent communication. "Breach attempts unsuccessful. External forces regrouping. Floor Guardian Shaltir requests permission to engage. Denied. Let them come deeper." Demiurge made another notation. "We want proper data samples." Charlie's mind raced through implications and half-formed plans. This wasn't shelter, it was a trap they'd willingly entered, and Heaven was about to trigger it. "You're going to kill them. The exorcists. We're going to respond appropriately to hostile incursion." Demiurge met her gaze without flinching. "Whether that results in casualties depends entirely on their tactical decisions. We don't initiate violence, Princess. We simply optimize outcomes." Somewhere deep in Nazarick's heart, beyond layers of stone and ancient magic, Ainz Ooal listened to Demiurge's report through their communication network. The demon's assessment arrived crisp and detailed. Heaven's forces massing at 4 breach points, attack patterns, suggesting coordinated but conventional tactics, refugee clusters secured in buffer zones. Conventional tactics. Ainz felt something that might have been amusement if his undead nature hadn't suppressed the emotion before it fully formed. He remembered Yggdrasil's final days when a coalition of over 1,500 players had attempted to raid Nazarick. They'd come in organized waves, professional and determined. They'd broken through the first 3 floors with acceptable casualties, reached the 4th, pushed hard against the 5th. None had escaped the 8th floor. That hadn't been power. That had been system architecture layers of defense that forced invaders into predetermined patterns, funneling them toward kill zones while cutting off retreat. Information gathering followed by tactical adjustment. The guild's philosophy distilled into dungeon design. Heaven's exorcists were approaching with the same assumptions those players had carried: superior force, righteous purpose, established authority. They expected resistance to follow predictable patterns. Nazarick didn't do predictable. "Demiurge," Ainz's voice carried through their connection, measured and cold. "Maintain current protocols. Let them establish breach positions. I want full tactical assessment before we respond." "As you command, Ainz-sama." Demiurge's satisfaction bled through the link. They're treating this as a simple extraction operation. It's almost charming. "It's exploitable. Gather your data. I'll join you shortly." Ainz severed the connection and stood from his throne, bone fingers drumming once against the armrest. The throne room stretched vast and empty around him, built to impress and intimidate. In Yggdrasil, it had been the final boss arena. Here, in whatever reality Nazarick now occupied, it served as his command center. He looked toward the room's main entrance, where his floor guardians would soon gather for final briefing. Albedo would arrive first. She always did, eager and devoted in ways that sometimes concerned him. Demiurge would provide tactical analysis. Cocytus would stand ready for martial engagement if needed. The twins would monitor environmental controls, and Shaltir would be chomping at the bit for permission to engage. Ainz allowed himself a moment of genuine concern. Not fear his undead nature suppressed that, but calculated assessment of risk. These exorcists wielded weapons designed to permanently kill demons and sinners. Unknown capabilities meant unknown variables. Variables meant potential miscalculation. But the alternative was showing weakness, showing uncertainty. The Guardians needed their supreme being to be absolute, unshakable, always 5 steps ahead. That's what Ainz' Ooal gown represented. That's what the Guild's legacy demanded. So he would be absolute, even if he had to fake it. Back in Buffer Zone 7, the weight stretched taut. Sinners clustered together, seeking comfort in proximity. Angels sprawled against one wall, affecting boredom, while his eyes tracked every movement in the chamber. Husk had materialized. Somehow Charlie didn't remember him entering and stood nursing something from a flask that definitely hadn't come from the refreshment tables. Vaggie kept position between Charlie and Demiurge, who seemed content to observe the refugees like specimens in a particularly interesting terrarium. "This is wrong." Charlie spoke quietly, meant only for Vaggie's ears. "Everything about this is wrong." "Which part?" "The tomb that appeared from nowhere, the maids who smile while threatening murder, or the demon taking notes on our survival. All of it. We saved these people from heaven just to deliver them to something worse. We don't know it's worse yet." Vaggie's grip tightened on her spear. "Could be exactly the same. Could be." The lights flickered. Not dramatic, not accompanied by ominous sound effects. Just a momentary disruption, like a power surge somewhere in the tomb's depths. Yuri's expression shifted fractionally. "Breach successful. External forces have entered the tomb's outer ring. Defensive protocols engaging." "Finally." Demiurge dismissed his clipboard with a gesture. "Yuri, maintain refugee containment. Alert the other Pleiades, we have guests to entertain." He turned to leave, paused at the threshold, glanced back at Charlie with something approximating curiosity. "You should hope your heaven friends are smarter than they appear, Princess. The Great Tomb doesn't look kindly on uninvited intrusion. And Nazarick has had 6 centuries to perfect its hospitality." Then he was gone, the passage sealing behind him with the finality of a vault. Charlie stared at the blank wall, at the trapped sinners, at the maid standing guard, with perfect professional courtesy masking something infinitely dangerous. "We have to do something," she whispered. "We have to survive," Vaggie countered. "Heroism comes after we understand what we're actually dealing with." Above them, beyond the buffer zone's contained safety, the first exorcists pushed deeper into Nazarick's halls. They moved with practiced efficiency, weapons ready, wings folded for close-quarters combat. They expected resistance, expected demons and traps and sinner defenses. What they got was silence. Empty corridors, walls that watched, and deep in the tomb's infrastructure systems activated that hadn't been needed since YGG Drossel's final days. Doors sealed according to algorithms written by players who'd treated dungeon defense as competitive sport. Hallways rearranged themselves, following probability matrices designed to maximize tactical disadvantage for invaders. The exorcists advanced confident in their mission and their power. Nazarick welcomed them the way a spider welcomes flies, with infinite patience and predetermined outcomes. The game's second phase had begun. Well, maybe Charlie really thinks she found a miracle, doesn't she? But did you catch how the undead servant talked? Terms and conditions apply. That is never a good sign. It is crazy how Nazarick just displaces buildings without even breaking them. It is like they are rewriting the map of hell itself. Honestly, I guess Ainz isn't playing hero. He is running a data experiment to see how sinners and angels behave under pressure. It is super creepy, but also kind of brilliant. What do you guys think? Is this a genuine safe haven? Or is Charlie leading everyone into a giant spider web? Adam watched from above as his teams entered the anomaly through 4 separate breach points. Standard extraction protocol. Overwhelm the structure, secure. The sinners neutralize any resistance. Clean professional, done 1,000 times. Except the structure wasn't cooperating. Command, this is Strike 1. Lieutenant Cass's voice crackled through the communication network. We've secured entry at Northwest Quadrant. Proceeding to target extraction zone. Strike 2, Southeast entry confirmed. That was Marcus, 15 years of extermination experience. Light resistance moving to rendezvous point Beta. Adam nodded to Lute. See? Whatever this thing is, it bleeds like everything else in hell. Lute studied the anomaly with narrowed eyes. Something's wrong with the resonance. Our tracking spells are getting interference. It's hell. Everything interferes. Adam adjusted his position wings, catching thermal updrafts. Give them 10 minutes. If they haven't extracted by then, we escalate. 10 minutes wouldn't be nearly enough. Inside Nazarick's outer ring, Strike 1 advanced through what appeared to be a service corridor. Functional lighting. Stone floors worn smooth by centuries of traffic. The walls bore no decoration, no obvious threat, just architecture. Lieutenant Cass led her team of 6 weapons ready, but encountering nothing worth using them on. Command, Strike 1. We're not seeing hostiles. Area appears abandoned. Static answered her. She tried again. Command, do you copy? More static than nothing. The communication crystal in her palm flickered once and went dark. Interference getting worse, one of her squad reported. Switching to short range. They proceeded deeper, following what their entry briefing had identified as the shortest route to the refugee holding areas. The map displayed clearly in their tactical overlay straight line, 300 meters, minimal obstacles. The map was lying. After 200 meters of straight corridor, they should have reached an intersection. Instead, they hit a gentle curve that definitely hadn't been there on initial scan. Cass checked her positioning crystal, still functional, still showing their location as accurate. But the corridor kept curving. This doesn't match the schematic. One of her squad, younger, less experienced, sounded uncertain. We should have turned by now. We follow the path until it reconnects. Cass kept her voice level. Panic was contagious in enclosed spaces. Eyes sharp. This could be herding us into a kill zone. It was, but not the kind she expected. The curve straightened out into another long corridor identical to the first. Same lighting, same worn stone, same absolute absence of anything worth fighting. They walked for another 5 minutes before her squad mate spoke again. Lieutenant, I think we passed this section already. Impossible. We haven't doubled back. That scorch mark on the wall. From when we tested for traps. I remember it. Cass looked. There was indeed a scorch mark, fresh, still smoking slightly. Exactly where they'd thrown a test bolt 10 minutes ago. Which meant they'd walked in a complete circle without once turning around. Her training kicked in before the implications could paralyze her. Formation Beta. We're backtracking to entry point and requesting support. They turned as one professional and controlled. The corridor behind them had changed. No longer the straight path they'd just walked, now it branched into 3 separate passages, each identical, each leading into shadow their light couldn't quite penetrate. "Command, this is Strike 1. We have a situation." No response. Not even static. Across the tomb, Strike 2 was having their own problems. Marcus had led exterminations for 15 years. He knew urban combat, knew dungeon raids, knew how demons thought and how sinners hid. What he didn't know was architecture that changed its mind. His team had entered southeast, pushed through initial resistance, 3 minor undead scouts. The first 2 fell to coordinated strikes, blessed weapons burning through whatever animated their bodies. The third tried to flee and was cut down mid-retreat. Small victories. Proof that angelic steel still worked, that heaven's power still mattered. Then they advanced toward Rally Point Beta, and the small victories stopped meaning anything. Rally Point Beta had moved. Not metaphorically. The large chamber that should have been at coordinates 773 was now at coordinates 781. Or possibly both places simultaneously. Marcus's positioning crystal kept updating, showing him in 2 locations at once. "Spatial manipulation," he told his team. "Some kind of folded space. We've seen this before in demonic strongholds." But demonic strongholds usually had the decency to be consistent about their impossibility. Nazarick seemed to be making up new rules every 30 seconds. They reached what should have been Rally Point Beta and found instead a junction of 6 hallways, none of which matched their tactical overlay. Marcus tried the communication crystal again, dead. Tried a flare spell to signal their position. The magic launched correctly but vanished into the ceiling without producing light. "We're being jammed." His second tested her own spells. "Not blocked, redirected. Someone's playing with the metaphysical framework." Then we navigate manually. Marcus picked the rightmost corridor at random. Standard dungeon protocol mark. Our path maintain formation, find an external wall and follow it out. They marked the junction with a blessed sigil that would burn for hours. Proceeded down the chosen corridor for exactly 3 minutes. Reached another junction, the same junction. Their sigil still burned on the wall, fresh and bright. His second stared at the mark. We walked straight. No curves, no circles, straight. Topologies compromised. Marcus felt the first real threat of concern. Not panic, not yet, but recognition that their standard playbook might not apply. New plan. We go up. Find a window breakthrough to external extraction. Except when they looked up, there was no ceiling. Just shadow that their light couldn't reach, extending into impossible distance. And somewhere in that shadow, something laughed. Not human, not demonic, just amused. In buffer zone 7. Charlie paced while Vaggie tried to maintain situational awareness through sheer force of will. The maids had stopped offering refreshments. Now they simply stood guard, pleasant and absolutely immovable. Something's happening. Charlie could feel it the same way she could feel shifts in hell's ambient pressure. The tomb is doing something. Defending itself. Husk materialized with a bottle that definitely hadn't come from Nazarick's supplies. What did you expect? We walked into a fortification during a siege. Angel stretched, trying to ease tension. Yeah, but whose fortification hell didn't build this thing? Heaven sure as hell didn't. So whose home? As if summoned by the question, reality rippled. The ripple started at the room's center and spread outward in concentric waves, not disturbing anything physical, but definitely disturbing something. Several sinners cried out. One collapsed hyperventilating. When the ripples faded, Albedo stood where empty air had been. She was beautiful in the way that sharp objects were beautiful, aesthetically perfect, and fundamentally dangerous. Her appearance suggested nobility from some civilization that predated Hell's current hierarchy. She surveyed the assembled refugees with the kind of attention a jeweler might give to uncut stones. "Good evening." Her voice carried absolute courtesy and zero warmth. "I am Albedo, Overseer of the Floor Guardians. I'm here to provide a brief situational update." Charlie stepped forward before Vaggie could stop her. "Where are the exorcists, the angels who entered, currently navigating the Outer Ring defense network? Their progress is being monitored." Albedo's smile suggested she found the question quaint. "All entities within the tomb's bounds are accounted for." "Monitored how?" Vaggie's hand tightened on her spear. "Thoroughly." Albedo clasped her hands. "We maintain awareness of all variables within our territory. It would be irresponsible not to, especially during first contact scenarios with unknown combatants." "First contact," Charlie repeated. "You're treating this like an experiment. Would you prefer we treat it like an invasion?" Albedo's smile remained fixed. "Because our protocols for invasion are substantially less accommodating. This way, everyone has opportunities to learn." Charlie could imagine the angels somewhere in those halls, circling through identical corridors, each turn convinced they were progressing deeper. "You're torturing them, trapping them in loops, making them..." "We're observing baseline behavior under controlled stress conditions." Albedo dismissed the projection. "No physical harm has been inflicted. They simply can't find what they're looking for. Yet." "Yet," Vaggie echoed. "Meaning you'll let them eventually. Meaning the current phase will conclude when sufficient data has been gathered. Then we'll move to phase 2. Albedo's gaze settled on Charlie with uncomfortable intensity. "You seem distressed, Princess. These angels came here to kill the very people you sheltered. Why such concern for their welfare?" Charlie opened her mouth, closed it. The answer should have been simple, because all life had value. Because violence begat violence. Because there had to be a better way. But the words tangled in her throat under Albedo's scrutiny. "Because she's better than both sides deserve," Vaggie answered instead. "Which you'd understand if you gave a damn about anything except your data." "I give a damn about Nazarick's security." Albedo's temperature dropped. "Everything else is secondary. These angels violated our borders during an unauthorized entry. That we're studying them rather than killing them outright represents extraordinary restraint." "Restraint." Angel laughed sharp and bitter. "Sweetheart, I've worked for overlords. I know what restraint looks like when powerful assholes use the word. It means you're saving the real pain for later." Albedo regarded him with something approaching interest. "You have experience with power structures. How refreshing. Yes, we're saving certain options, but only if provoked further. Our current protocols are purely defensive." She paused as if listening to something none of them could hear. One team has managed to push deeper than anticipated. They're about to encounter something educational. "Defensive?" Charlie whispered. "Absolutely." Albedo's conviction rang genuine. "The great tomb of Nazarick does not initiate aggression. We simply ensure that aggression directed at us meets appropriate consequences." Above the tomb, Adam's patience finally cracked. 15 minutes. No contact, no extraction, no confirmed targets. He turned to Loot. "Send in Strike 4 and 5. Full assault formation. If the structure's interfering with communications, we go in force and clear it floor by floor." "Sir, we don't know what's causing the interference. Sending more troops into unknown conditions is exactly what we do during exterminations." Adam's hand went to his weapon. That anomaly thinks it can shelter sinners during a purge. We'll show it what heaven does to obstacles. Lute activated the signal flare. 2 more teams, 20 angels total, broke formation and descended toward Nazarick's walls. Inside the tomb in the throne room at its heart, Ainz received notification of the tactical shift. 20 new contacts entering the defense network. Previous teams still circulating through outer ring corridors beginning to show signs of frustration and resource depletion. Albedo's voice came through their link. Ainz heaven is escalating. Shall we proceed to active countermeasures? Ainz considered. In YGG Dressel, this would be the point where raiders committed their reserves, convinced that more force would break the deadlock. It never worked, spreading resources across a hostile dungeon just meant more assets to track and exploit. But YGG Drassel's raiders had been players with multiple lives and infinite respawns. These angels fought with permanent death on the line, which made them simultaneously more dangerous and more conservative. Maintain current protocols, Ainz commanded. Let them come deeper. I want clear behavioral data before we respond directly. As you wish. Albedo's satisfaction bled through the connection. Demiurge has requested permission to implement Maze Protocol Sigma. Shall I approve? Approved. But no lethal force yet. Capture if possible, redirect if not. Understood, Ainz. Ainz severed the link and stood bone fingers drumming once against the throne's armrest. 20 new angels, 3 teams already disoriented. Command structure beginning to fragment. The pieces were falling into position nicely. He walked to the throne room's balcony and looked out over Nazarick's internal expanse. Somewhere in those corridors, heaven's finest were learning that righteousness didn't navigate topology, that angelic weapons couldn't cut what you couldn't catch, that authority meant nothing to walls that answered to older laws. It was almost educational. In the outer ring, strike 4 whoosh. Breach through the northern wall, smooth entry, professional execution. Their commander, a grizzled veteran named Kale, maintained perfect discipline as his team pushed into the structure. Different entry point, same bullshit architecture, he muttered to his second. Stay tight. Mark every junction. If this place wants to play maze, we'll solve it the hard way. They advanced 30 meters before the first door appeared where no door should be. Kyle approached, carefully tested for traps, found nothing. The door was simple wood, unlocked opening into a small chamber. The chamber contained a table, a chair, and a tea set. Nothing else. No other exits. No windows. Just furniture and the strong smell of bergamot. What the hell? Kyle's second peered inside. Is this a rest area? It's a statement. Kyle backed away slowly. This place is telling us it's not threatened. It's offering us tea. They continued past the chamber, found 3 more identical rooms over the next 100 meters, each with tea, each completely unthreatening, each utterly bizarre in the context of a hostile breach. When they finally encountered something actually defensive, a pressure plate that triggered what looked like a blade trap, Kyle almost welcomed it. At least that made tactical sense. His second identified the mechanism. Standard ward-breaking protocols neutralized the activation rune. The trap's magic signature collapsed inert. See, his second said. We can fight this. Then the trap activated anyway. Blades descended from the ceiling, magicless, purely mechanical, triggered by a secondary system their ward-breaking hadn't touched. The blade stopped 3 inches above the floor and retracted. It's malfunctioning, Dara suggested. It's mocking us, Kale corrected. This whole place is one big psychological operation. He was right, but not in the way he thought. The traps weren't malfunctioning. They were demonstrating, showing that Nazarick could kill them at any time, but was choosing not to. Yet, Strike 5, entering from the west, encountered something different: actual resistance. 3 Pleiades maids appeared at a junction, blocking further advance. They stood in perfect formation, hands folded, expressions pleasant. "Good evening," said the one with golden hair, Lupus Regina. "I'm afraid this section is restricted. Please turn back." The team's commander raised her weapon. "Stand aside or be removed." Oh my. Lupus Regina's smile widened. "That sounds like a threat." "Yuri, did that sound like a threat to you?" Yuri Alpha stepped forward. "Definitely a threat. Protocol requires we respond appropriately." What followed wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. The Angels attacked with coordinated strikes, 3 from the front, 2 flanking 1 aerial support. Professional execution. Perfect timing. The maids didn't fight back. They dodged. Every strike missed by millimeters. Every spell redirected into walls. Every formation broken by simple footwork that looked effortless, but had to be the result of either perfect prediction or inhuman reflexes. After 30 seconds of failing to land a single hit, the commander called retreat. The maids let them go. "That was fun," Lupus Regina called after them. "Come back anytime." The Angels ran, regrouped at the previous junction, and tried to report what they'd encountered. Their communication crystals were still dead. In Buffer Zone 7, the refugees watched Albedo's projection as it updated with new information. More lights entering the tomb, some circulating in loops, others retreating from encounters with minimal casualties. "You're playing with them," Charlie said quietly. "We're establishing parameters." Albedo adjusted the map. How they respond under pressure. How they adapt. Whether they can adapt. All crucial intelligence for determining appropriate response levels. "And when you're done establishing parameters," Albedo's smile was a knife wrapped in silk, "then we'll know exactly how hard we can push before something breaks." The projection flickered, updated again. 1 cluster of lights strike. One had finally found something. They'd broken through into what looked like a larger chamber, possibly a staging area. Progress after 20 minutes of navigating impossible geometry. Except the chamber they'd found wasn't on any of their maps. Maze Protocol Sigma had begun rerouting space itself. Some corridors no longer belonged to the outer ring in any meaningful sense. Forward pockets, folded territory, spaces that touched deeper floors without traversing the distance between. And waiting inside, patient as stone, was something their briefing had never prepared them for. Albedo's smile sharpened. "Oh, good. The maze has routed them into one of Cocytus's forward observation zones. This should provide excellent comparative data." "No." Charlie stepped toward her. "Don't let them fight. Just let them leave." "Princess, they entered Nazarick bearing weapons with intent to cause harm. We don't just let that go unanswered." Albedo gestured, and the projection zoomed in on the chamber. "But if it comforts you, Cocytus has been instructed to minimize casualties. He'll probably only cripple a few." "Probably." Vagji grabbed Charlie's arm before she could do something regrettable. "We can't stop this. We have to try. We'll die trying." Vagji's grip tightened. "And then we can't help anyone." Above Nazarick, Adam watched as his 5 teams vanished into the structure's depths. Waited for confirmation, waited for extraction signals, got nothing but silence. "Loot. Prepare full assault formation. We're going in with everything." "Sir." "Everything. That structure wants a war. We'll give it judgment." He didn't see Albedo's observation of his forces Didn't know about the tracking monitoring his team's confused wandering. Didn't realize that Nazarick had spent ages perfecting defenses against exactly this kind of assault. Didn't understand that he'd just made the exact decision the tomb wanted him to make. In the throne room, Ainz received confirmation. Heaven was committing full force. Excellent. Albedo. End Phase 1. Begin active countermeasures. With pleasure, Ainz-sama. Across Nazarick systems that had remained dormant, activated. Doors sealed. Corridors rearranged. The tomb stopped merely redirecting. Now it hunted. And Heaven's finest were already inside the web. The shift happened without warning. One moment Strike One was attempting to backtrack through another impossible loop. The next, the walls around them locked into place, with a sound like tumblers falling in a massive vault. Lieutenant Cass felt it, the change in pressure, the way the air stopped circulating, the sudden absence of ambient noise. Defensive formation. Now. Her squad moved with trained precision weapons raised backs to each other. The corridor remained empty, the lighting unchanged. Nothing visible had altered. Except they could no longer move forward, or backward, or anywhere the hallway hadn't explicitly approved. Lieutenant, her second's voice carried an edge. The walls are closer. They were. Not crushing trap closer, but enough to notice. The 10-foot-wide corridor had narrowed to 8 feet. As they watched, it contracted another 6 inches. Cass made the call. Breakthrough. Blessed charges on the left wall, 3-second delay. On my mark. They planted the charges, fell back, triggered the sequence. The explosion should have blown a hole large enough to escape through. Should have cracked stone and bent steel and created an exit through sheer concentrated divine force. The wall absorbed the blast without a scratch. Then the ceiling opened and something dropped into their midst. Not something. Someone. Female-made uniform immaculate despite falling 20 feet. Silver hair catching the light. Expression pleasant and absolutely focused. Yuri Alpha landed in perfect silence. Good evening, she said as if greeting dinner guests. I'm afraid you violated restricted area protocols. Please surrender your weapons and follow me to detention processing. Cass didn't hesitate. 6 angels coordinated strike pattern blessed weapons designed to permanently kill demons and undead. They moved as one every angle, covered every strike calculated to overwhelm through pure professional execution. Yuri didn't fight back. She moved. The first strike, a spear thrust aimed at center mass, passed through empty air as Yuri shifted her weight fractionally. The second and third came from opposite angles, timed to catch her mid-dodge. She bent backward, the weapons crossing above her torso with millimeters to spare. The fourth attacker went low. The fifth high. The sixth straight forward. Yuri stepped between them, one hand catching an ankle, the other deflecting a blade with her palm. She didn't grab. Didn't grapple. Just guided momentum in directions it didn't want to go. 3 angels collided. 2 stumbled. 1 managed to recover and launch a follow-up strike. Yuri caught the blessed sword between her palms, held it motionless, then twisted. The blade shattered fragments, scattering across stone. Resistance noted, she said calmly. Escalating response level. She moved faster. Not superhuman fast in the way that broke reality. Just efficient, economical, every motion accomplishing exactly what it needed and nothing more. An elbow here, a palm strike there. Pressure points hit with surgical precision. Within 10 seconds, 4 angels were on the ground. Within 20, all 6. None dead. All breathing. Just not capable of continuing resistance. Yuri straightened her uniform. Medical attention will be provided shortly. Please remain still. Cass tried to rise, found her legs wouldn't cooperate. Whatever the maid had done to her nervous system, it wasn't wearing off quickly. "What are you?" Pleiades battle made 6th Echelon Defense. You entered a restricted zone without authorization. This is the consequence. Yuri produced what looked like a small communication device. Yuri to command. Strike 1 neutralized. Requesting retrieval detail. From Strike 1's position in the contracted corridor to Strike 2's attempt at vertical escape. Marcus and his team had given up on finding rally points that stayed put. Instead, they'd decided to go up. Breach the ceiling, find open air, regroup externally. The ceiling extended into infinite shadow. They flew upward for 5 minutes, weapons ready, maintaining tight formation. No ceiling appeared. No end to the vertical shaft they'd somehow entered. Then gravity reversed, not gradually, not with warning. One moment they were ascending, the next they were falling sideways into a wall that had become a floor. The impact scattered their formation, sent weapons skittering across stone. Marcus recovered first, calling count. Sound off. 5 responses. Good enough. They'd survived worse. Then the floor became a ceiling again, and they were falling properly. 30 feet down into what looked like a reception hall, all polished marble and crystalline chandeliers. CZ Delta stood waiting at the hall's center, firearm raised. Unauthorized entry detected. The automaton maid stated, her voice flat. Commencing suppression protocol. The gun didn't fire bullets. It fired what looked like concentrated light, precise, silent, leaving no crater where it hit. The first shot struck the wall next to Marcus's head, leaving a perfectly circular scorch mark. Scatter? Marcus dove left as his team split, using pillars for cover. Ranged engagement, return fire. They did. Holy bolts, blessed arrows, divine wrath concentrated into projectiles, designed to unmake unholy things. CZ walked through the barrage like it was light rain. Some shots missed. The ones that hit bounced. Not off armor. Off nothing visible. Some kind of barrier that activated only when struck, dissipating immediately after. And all the while, that firearm kept firing, methodical, patient. Each shot placed to herd rather than kill, forcing the angels into tighter defensive positions. Marcus recognized the tactic. It was pinning fire, meant to keep them stationary, while something else moved into position. He looked up just in time to see Lupus Regina Beta dropping from a chandelier. The golden-haired maid landed in the middle of their scattered formation with a smile that belonged on a predator. Hiya. Sorry about the rough welcome. We don't get many visitors who can appreciate proper tactical exercises. She moved like violence set to music. One angel swung a blessed mace. Lupus Regina caught it mid-arc, used the momentum to spin the angel into his companion. Both went down hard. A third tried to flank. She kicked backward without looking, caught him in the solar plexus, sent him sliding across polished marble. Marcus managed to get a clean shot. Blessed bolt, full power, aimed center mass. Lupus Regina leaned aside. The bolt passed close enough to singe her uniform. Ooh, that was closer. She sounded delighted. You're better than the last batch. CZ raised difficulty to level 4. CZ's next shot didn't miss. Caught an angel's weapon hand, not enough to sever, but enough to disable. The scream echoed off crystal. Medical teams are standing by, Lupus Regina added cheerfully. We're not savages, but you did break into our home with weapons drawn. That's just rude. Marcus made the hardest decision of his career. Fallback controlled retreat move. Oh no, I don't think so. Lupus Regina's smile widened. You came all this way. Stay a while. What followed wasn't a retreat. It was a rout. The angels fought well, professionally, bravely, with every skill their training provided. But fighting well meant nothing when your opponents were treating combat like a training exercise, adjusting difficulty settings, testing response patterns. When Marcus's team finally escaped that hall, and escape was permitted, he knew that now they left behind 2 angels, too injured to move, and a third who'd taken a shot to the leg that had somehow bypassed every defensive ward they carried. Non-lethal, calculated, controlled, and absolutely terrifying. In Buffer Zone 7, the refugees felt the change, even if they couldn't see it. The tomb's ambient pressure shifted. What had been passive resistance became active assertion. Angel dust stopped pretending to lounge. Okay, so that felt like someone just flipped a switch, Vaggie finished. Her grip on her spear had gone white-knuckled. They were testing before. Now they're fighting. Charlie looked to where Albedo had been standing, but the overseer had vanished at some point. In her place stood Solution Epsilon, the maid who looked almost human except for the way light bent strangely around her edges. Situation update. Solution announced, her voice carrying that same professional courtesy that made threats sound like dinner invitations. External forces have escalated to Level 3 engagement protocols. Nazarick defense systems are responding proportionally. Refuge status remains active for all compliant entities. What does Level 3 mean? Charlie asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Active countermeasures with injury authorization. Lethal force remains restricted, pending further escalation. Solution's smile could have meant anything. We're still being quite gentle. Gentle. Charlie thought about the exorcists out there. Heaven's warriors, trained killers in their own right beings, who had ended her people by the thousands for centuries. Thought about them encountering whatever gentle meant in Nazarick's vocabulary. Thought about how she'd led sinners into this place, believing it was salvation. Husk appeared at her shoulder, flask in hand. Kid, stop. Stop what? Blaming yourself. You made a call with bad information. We all did. Beating yourself up doesn't help anyone. People are getting hurt. People were getting hurt outside. Husk took a pull from his flask. At least in here they're not dying. Yet. That yet hung in the air like smoke. Vaggie moved closer to Charlie, keeping her body between her girlfriend and Solution. How long until we can leave? When external hostilities cease. Solution gestured vaguely toward the walls. Current projections suggest 2 to 4 hours, assuming Heaven demonstrates tactical flexibility. And if they don't? Solution's expression didn't change. Then projections extend accordingly. Deep in Nazarick, in the throne room, where shadows gathered like courtiers, Ainz received real-time updates through channels that bypassed conventional communication. Demiurge's voice arrived clear and clinical. Ainz Sama Level 3 engagement proceeding within parameters. Pleiades report successful neutralization of 3 enemy squads. Casualties minimal, 2 enemy combatants with moderate injuries, remainder intact. Defense efficiency exceeds projections by 18%. Guardian deployment status. Ainz's voice carried no inflection, no emotion, just authority. Cocytus requests permission to engage Strike 4 directly. They've reached his outer perimeter. Ainz considered. In Wiggy-Dressel, this would be the point where raiders encountered their first floor guardian, usually a reality check that separated competent players from merely determined ones. These angels had proven competent. Time to see if competence translated to adaptability. Granted. Engagement Level 4. Cocytus is authorized to demonstrate capability, but not execute. I want prisoners if possible, casualties if necessary, but no permanent losses yet. As you command. Demiurge's satisfaction bled through the link. Shall I inform Heaven's command structure of our restraint? No, let them draw their own conclusions. Ainz stood from his throne bone fingers, tapping once against the armrest. How are they coordinating externally? Command entity remains airborne above the tomb, attempting communication with deployed units, receiving minimal response. Frustration indicators increasing. Adam. The name had come through intelligence channels. Exorcist Commander, Heaven's chosen instrument for this particular purge. Arrogant by reputation, effective by results. Currently learning that results required more than righteousness. Maintain observation, Ainz ordered. If he attempts personal entry, alert me immediately. Understood, Ainz-sama. Ainz severed the connection and walked to the throne room's main viewing portal. It showed him what he needed to see: corridors and chambers across multiple floors. Angels scattered and struggling, his forces moving with the kind of coordinated precision that only came from absolute loyalty and perfect information. He'd built Nazarick, or rather the Guild had built it, to withstand exactly this scenario. Overwhelming force meeting superior preparation. Numbers crashing against system architecture. The angels fought well, but they fought like they expected to win through valor and divine favor. Nazarick had been constructed by people who knew valor meant nothing to mathematics. Strike 4 encountered Cocytus in what should have been a minor junction. The space had been 10 feet across when they'd entered. Now it was 30, the walls having simply expanded. In the chamber's center stood something that made every angel's hand tighten on their weapons. Cocytus towered easily 8 feet tall, 4 arms each holding a different weapon, insectoid features that suggested intelligence and absolute zero in equal measure. Ice crystals formed in the air around him, frost spreading across stone in geometric patterns. Unauthorized entities, halt! His voice emerged clipped, each word separated by brief pauses. This floor is restricted. Commander Kael raised his weapon slowly. We're not here for you. We're here for the sinners you're sheltering. Stand aside. Request denied. Sinners are under Nazarick protection. You will retreat or be removed. We don't retreat from demons. Kael's team spread into combat formation. 10 angels blessed weapons' divine purpose. Against 1 guardian, no matter how large. Bad mathematics. Cocytus moved first, not a charge. A professional advanced weapons raised in textbook formation. The first strike came from his upper right arm. A blade that looked like frozen starlight, moving faster than something that size had any right to move. Kael blocked. The impact sent him sliding backward 10 feet, boots carving trenches in stone. The second strike came from the lower left, then upper left, then lower right. 4 weapons, 4 angles each blow calculated to exploit the opening created by the last. The angels fought back with everything they had. Coordinated strikes blessed fire. Divine wrath concentrated into enough raw power to level a city block. Cocytus weathered it like winter weathering spring. Ice formed where fire struck. Frost spread across blessed steel, not destroying it, but making it heavier, slower. And all the while, those 4 weapons kept moving in patterns that suggested centuries of practice. 1 angel went down with a frozen shoulder. Another took a pommel strike that cracked ribs. A third found himself disarmed, literally not severed, but his weapon frozen solid and shattered by a follow-up strike. You fight. Well, Cocytus stated, blocking 3 simultaneous attacks without apparent effort. But you fight like this is a battle. You can win. He slammed the butt of his staff into the ground. Ice erupted outward in a perfect circle, catching 4 angels and freezing them to the knees. Not deadly, not even permanently crippling, just immobilizing. This is a lesson. Cocytus lowered his weapons fractionally. Leave, now, or the lesson becomes painful. Kyle looked at his team's 6 still mobile, 4 frozen, none uninjured. Looked at the Guardian, who'd taken their best shots and treated them like training exercises. Made the call. Fall back. Everyone who can move, help those who can't. We're leaving. Cocytus didn't pursue. Just stood there, weapons ready, as the angels retreated with whatever dignity they could salvage. When they'd cleared the expanded chamber, Kyle heard it not mocking, not cruel. Just matter-of-fact, next time, we will not show restraint. Above the tomb, Adam felt his patience shatter. 5 teams deployed, 2 completely out of contact. 1 reporting heavy casualties and requesting extraction, another in full retreat. The 5th pinned down by what the scattered reports called maid-shaped kill bots. And through it all, that damn structure just sat there, absorbing everything heaven threw at it. Sir, Lute's voice carried warning. We need to pull back, reassess, come back with... We're not pulling back. Adam's hand went to his weapon. They're hiding sinners during a purge. That's a direct violation of what? There's no law against fortifications. No protocol for anomalies that don't originate from hell or heaven. Lute moved into his line of sight. This isn't a normal extermination. We're fighting something we don't understand. Then we make it understand. Adam drew his weapon fully. Signal full assault. Everyone we have left. We're going in, we're getting our people out, and we're burning that tomb to bedrock. Adam. That's an order, Lieutenant. Lute stared at him, recognition dawning. He wasn't thinking tactically anymore. This had become personal. The structure had wounded his pride, made him look ineffective, turned a routine purge into a disaster. She activated the signal anyway. Because orders were orders, even bad ones. 20 more angels broke formation and descended toward Nazarick's walls. In the throne room, Ainz received notification of the escalation. Smiled, though the gesture was meaningless, without flesh. Albedo. End Level 3 engagement. Initiate Level 4 protocols. Ainz-sama. Even Albedo sounded uncertain. Level 4 authorizes lethal force. Measured lethal force. They've committed their reserves. Time to show them what restraint looks like when it ends. Ainz's voice carried absolute 0. No massacres, no excessive casualties. But if they insist on pushing deeper, they get to see what the tomb actually does to invaders. As you command. Albedo's satisfaction was audible. Floor Guardians are authorized to demonstrate full capability. Demonstrate. Not annihilate. I want them alive enough to report back what they encountered. Understood perfectly, Ainz-sama. Across Nazarick, the atmosphere changed again. What had been controlled a response became something harder. Walls shifted from passive barriers to active threats. Corridors that had merely confused now actively hunted. And the Floor Guardians stopped playing. In Buffer Zone 7, Charlie felt the shift and knew instinctively, terribly, that people were about to die. Not sinners, not refugees, angels, heaven's warriors, beings she'd been raised to see as absolute good fighting absolute evil. Except Nazarick wasn't evil in any way she understood. It was just other. A system operating by rules that made her comfortable categories meaningless. We have to stop this, she whispered. Vaggie pulled her close. We can't, Charlie. We're not part of this fight. Then what are we, witnesses? Husk's voice carried grim finality. Sometimes that's all you get to be. Above, Adam led his forces toward Nazarick's walls, righteous fury burning, convinced that enough force could break any resistance. Below, Ainz' Ooal gown gave the order that would transform a lesson into a warning. And between them, in corridors and chambers across 8 floors of impossibility, Heaven and Nazarick prepared to show each other what restraint actually cost. The real battle was about to begin. Okay, that was just embarrassing for the exorcists. It is so wild to watch the battle maids just dodge everything, like they are playing a game on easy mode. Cositus literally froze the angels to the floor and told them the lesson was over. What a huge power gap it is. Heaven thinks they are the top dogs because they have been bullying sinners for centuries. But Nazarick is a whole different beast. They don't care about holy weapons because they follow their own rules. I wonder whether Adam is actually in over his head, or does he have a secret weapon? I really want to hear you guys' theories while we head into the next part. The atmosphere in Buffer Zone 7 had gone from tense to suffocating. Solution Epsilon still stood watch, pleasant and immovable. The sinners huddled closer together, survival instinct overriding Hell's usual hierarchies. Even Angel had stopped cracking jokes, a sure sign something fundamental had shifted. Alastair, however, looked intrigued. He'd been silent since the Escalation, studying the maids, the architecture, the way reality bent around Nazarick's edges. Now he stood brushed invisible dust from his coat and walked toward Solution with that permanent smile fixed in place. Pardon the interruption, my dear, but I find myself curious about our accommodations. Solution's expression didn't change. Questions may be submitted through proper channels. Oh, I prefer the personal touch. Alastair's voice carried that radio static quality, the sense of broadcast reaching beyond immediate conversation. See, I've dealt with overlords, warlords, demons of every stripe and ambition. Power recognizes power, as they say. And this place, he gestured broadly, positively radiates it. Your point? No point, just professional admiration. Alastair's smile sharpened. Though I do wonder, how does one establish such absolute control? It's not raw strength. I can smell that from a mile away, and this is something different. Charlie moved to intervene, but Vaggie caught her arm. Let him dig his own grave. Controlnadas, Solution replied, derives from understanding systems. Your hell operates on hierarchies built from individual power. Nazarick operates on coordinated infrastructure. She tilted her head fractionally. You're attempting to probe for weaknesses through casual conversation. It's transparent. Guilty as charged. Alastair's laugh crackled like bad reception. Can't fault a fella for trying. Though between us, professionals' threats mean nothing if you can't back them up. And I've seen some truly creative threats in my time. Then allow me to educate you on ours. The temperature plummeted 20 degrees in an instant. Solution's form shifted not dramatically, not with warning. One moment she appeared human. The next her edges blurred her surface tension, breaking down into something that flowed. The maid uniform remained, but what wore it was clearly liquid death, given purpose and protocol. Nazarick does not threaten, she stated, voice unchanged even as her physical coherence became negotiable. We establish parameters. You are currently within acceptable behavioral bounds. Deviation results in correction. Would you like a practical demonstration of correction protocols? Alastair's smile never wavered, but his broadcast frequency stuttered. Just for a moment, just enough to notice. Well now, that is creative. He took a step back, casual, unhurried, but definitely back. I believe I'll save demonstrations for another time. Professional courtesy and all. Solution reconstituted into humanoid form. Wise decision. Charlie exhaled slowly. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Even Alistair, who'd laughed at overlords and mocked death itself, had backed down. What exactly had they walked into? The question answered itself seconds later when the tremor hit. Not earthquake violent, more deliberate. A single sustained pulse that traveled through the tomb's structure like a heartbeat, announcing something terminal. Solution received whatever communication her kind used. Engagement level 5 activated. Multiple hostile entities eliminated. Refuge protocols remain in effect. Eliminated. Not captured. Not subdued. Eliminated. How many? Vaggy's question came out flat. Classification restricted. Solution's pleasant expression had returned, which somehow made it worse. Casualties are an inevitable consequence of sustained hostile action. Nazarick defense protocols contain graduated response thresholds. These thresholds have been exceeded. Husk appeared from wherever he'd been lurking, flask already to his lips. She means they just killed some angels. Permanently. The silence that followed could have crushed diamonds. Charlie felt something crack inside her chest. No, they wouldn't. They said they were being restrained, that this was about defense, not they are being restrained. Solution interrupted. Elimination remains localized to specific tactical zones. Generalized extermination protocols have not been activated. A pause. Yet. Somewhere in Nazarick's depths, Strike 3 learned what graduated response meant in practice. They'd pushed deeper than any other team through what felt like endless resistance. Every junction, a puzzle. Every corridor, a test. But they'd adapted. Learned patterns started making real progress toward what their tactical overlay identified as a central staging area. They'd thought they were winning. Then the walls sealed. Not slowly. Not with warning. One moment they were advancing through a wide chamber. The next, every exit had vanished into smooth stone. Commander Eli called defensive formation. Her team, 8 angels, all veterans, all survivors of a dozen exterminations, moved with practiced efficiency. Backs together, weapons out, eyes scanning for the threat. Unauthorized entities, a voice announced from everywhere and nowhere. You have violated secure territory. Resistance is noted. Lethal countermeasures authorized. Demiurge materialized from shadow clipboard in hand expression, professionally apologetic. I'm sorry it's come to this, he said, sounding genuinely regretful. We did offer multiple opportunities to withdraw. But you've pushed past 3 separate boundary markers. At this point, defense protocols leave me no discretion. Eli raised her weapon. We're here for the sinners. Stand aside or what you'll fight you've been fighting. Quite well, actually. Demiurge made a notation on his clipboard. But fighting well and winning are different metrics. You're in a sealed chamber. No exits, no reinforcements, no communication with your command structure. Against an opponent who controls every variable. He looked up, eyes carrying something ancient and analytical. This isn't a battle. It's a conclusion. The floor beneath them turned to acid. Not literally, Nazarick's defenses were more elegant than that. What erupted from below was darkness, given physical form and creatures that had no right to exist, serving a master who demanded their absolute loyalty. The angels fought. They fought with everything they had. Every blessing and ward and desperate prayer their training provided. Fought with courage and skill, and the kind of ferocity that came from knowing death was imminent. It didn't matter. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, 8 angels lay still on stone that had already begun absorbing their remains. Demiurge stood untouched, making final notations. Casualties confirmed. 8 combatants. Permanent termination achieved. He closed the clipboard. Clean the chamber. Prepare for next incursion phase. Things emerged from the walls to comply. Demiurge was already gone, moved on to other matters, the elimination, as noteworthy to him, as completed paperwork. Above Nazarick, Adam felt it. Not through communication, those channels were still compromised, but through the absence where Strike 3 should have been. The sudden void where 8 of his people had existed moments before. Report, he demanded. I need confirmation on Strike 3's status. Silence. The kind that confirmed worst assumptions. They're gone, Lute said quietly. Not captured. Not injured. Gone. Adam's grip on his weapon tightened until his knuckles went white. Define gone. Killed permanently. That structure just eliminated 8 angels. Lute's voice carried the weight of something breaking. We need to abort. Pull everyone out. Regroup, and we're not aborting. Adam's voice could have cut steel. They killed our people. That's an act of war. It was self-defense during a purge operation we initiated. Adam, they're stronger than us in that environment. Every report confirms it. We're fighting on their terms in their territory. Then we change the terms. Adam drew his weapon, fully divine light cascading off the blade. Signal full retreat for everyone, except Strike Teams 7 and 8. I'm going in personally. That's exactly what they want. I don't care what they want. Adam's wings spread wide, divine authority radiating outward. They think they can kill angels without consequences. Let's educate them on how heaven responds to dead comrades. He descended before Lute could argue further, 20 angels in his wake. The best fighters, the most experienced killers. All of them burning with righteous fury and the need to answer blood with blood. Nazarick's walls opened to receive them. In the throne room, Ainz observed the tactical shift with something approaching concern. The command entity is entering directly, Albedo reported. Power readings suggest significantly higher capability than standard units. Ainz drummed bone fingers against his armrest. In Yggdrasil, this would be the raid leader committing personally, usually a sign of desperation, occasionally a sign of hidden trump cards. Either way, dangerous. Guardian deployment status. Cocytus maintains outer perimeter. Shaltir requests permission to engage command entity directly. Albedo's tone suggested she was relaying rather than endorsing. She's eager. Too eager. Shaltir was powerful, but her combat style favored overwhelming offense. Against an unknown entity radiating that much divine energy, caution seemed wiser. Denied. Have Demiurge establish a funnel pattern. Lead the command entity toward the 7th floor, but don't engage directly yet. I want full tactical assessment before we commit Guardian resources. And if he forces engagement, then respond proportionally. But no heroics, no showboating. We've already proven our point. Ainz stood, bone hands clasped behind his back. How are our guests reacting? The refugees remain contained. The Hellborn delegation appears distressed by confirmed casualties. Albedo's smile was subtle. Particularly the princess. She seems to be experiencing ideological conflict. Good. Not because Ainz enjoyed suffering, but because understanding that power operated beyond morality was a useful lesson. Charlie Morningstar might learn something valuable from today. If she survived it. Adam carved through Nazarick's outer defenses like divine wrath made manifest. 2 undead sentries tried to bar his path. He reduced them to ash with a single swing. A Pleiades maid attempted interception. He forced her into retreat through sheer, overwhelming power. The tomb's architecture tried to confuse him. He burned straight through walls, creating his own routes. Behind him, his elite teams followed, exploiting the breaches he created. For the first time since entering this nightmare structure, heaven was dictating terms. Then the corridor opened into a vast chamber, and waiting inside was something that made Adam reassess his tactical confidence. Mare Bello Fiore stood at the chamber's center, looking young and uncertain and absolutely terrified. The dark elf child couldn't have been more than 10 years old by appearance, wearing a simple dress and clutching a gnarled staff like a security blanket. Please don't come any further, Mare's stammered voice, barely audible. I don't want to hurt anyone. Adam's slowed instincts warring with appearance. The child looked harmless, terrified, exactly the kind of victim Charlie Morningstar would have sheltered. Exactly the kind of bait a sophisticated defense would use. Stand aside, Adam ordered. We're not here for you. I can't. Mare's grip on the staff tightened. Lord Ainz said to defend this floor. So I have to defend it. One of Adam's team started forward. I'll handle the kid. Mare raised the staff. The chamber's floor erupted. Not metaphorically. The stone simply ceased being solid, became liquid earth that grabbed and pulled and swallowed. Half of Adam's team went down in the first second, dragged into stone that flowed like quicksand and held like steel. Adam launched himself, airborne wings straining. Spread out! Don't! The ceiling came down. Not collapsing, descending. A massive section of worked stone lowered with the inevitability of judgment, forcing flyers back to ground level, where Mare's earth manipulation waited. 3 more angels disappeared into stone. Adam hit solid ground, rolled, came up with his weapon blazing divine fire. The flames washed across Mare's position and died without touching the child. Some kind of barrier, invisible, absolute. I'm sorry, Mare whispered. But you killed our people first. We killed demons and sinners. It's what we do, and we're protecting them. Mare's voice gained fractional strength. So now we kill you. The earth reached up like hungry hands. Adam fought. His remaining team fought. They fought with divine fury and blessed steel and every technique heaven had developed over millennia of warfare. Mare stood still, staff raised, tears streaming down young features. And the earth kept rising when Adam finally broke free of the chamber, dragging 4 surviving teammates with him, leaving 8 more buried in stone that refused to yield them back. Mare was still crying, not from fear. From necessity. I'm sorry, the child said again to empty air and silent stone. Adam retreated. Not tactically, not in organized withdrawal. He fled wings, straining divine power, blazing just to maintain forward momentum against a tomb that no longer pretended to merely resist. Nazarick had stopped playing. The full retreat signal went out minutes later. Every remaining team received the same order. Disengage extract, return to aerial assembly point immediately. Some teams made it out. Others didn't. The final count would take hours to compile. In Buffer Zone 7, the refugees felt the change again. The oppressive weight of active combat. Fading. Not gone. Just withdrawing like a predator satisfied it had made its point. Solution received final confirmation. External hostilities ceasing. Extermination operations suspended. Refuge protocols transitioning to release phase. You will be escorted to safe exit points within the hour. Charlie sat on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at nothing. Vaggie knelt beside her. Charlie. They died. Charlie's voice came out hollow. Angels died because I brought sinners here. Because I thought there was a better way. There wasn't. They would have died outside. But at least outside I could pretend heaven was the problem. Now, Charlie looked up, eyes haunted. Now, I don't know what's worse, the system that kills routinely or the system that kills efficiently. Husk settled nearby, flask empty, but still held like ritual. Welcome to the real world, kid, where every choice is terrible and you pick the least terrible one. That's not hope. No, it's survival. Hope comes after. Above Nazarick, Adam gathered what remained of his force. 60 angels deployed. 38 returned. 22 confirmed casualties, permanent, final, gone. The worst loss in extermination history. Lute approached carefully. Sir, we need to report this to... We report nothing. Adam's voice came out dead ground down by failure. This was a rogue anomaly. We eliminated it. The purge completed successfully with acceptable casualties. Adam, that's the report, Lieutenant. Drafted accordingly. Lute stared at him, seeing something broken behind the divine authority. He couldn't admit failure. Couldn't report that something in hell had beaten heaven's finest. So he'd lie. Call it victory. Bury the dead under acceptable losses. And next time, because there would be a next time, he'd come prepared to win, even if winning required methods heaven wouldn't approve. In the throne room, Ainz received final combat reports. 22 confirmed eliminations, Demiurge stated. 31 wounded and released, 7 still in medical detention pending processing. 0 Guardian casualties. Infrastructure damage minimal. Acceptable. Ainz stood from his throne. Begin refugee release protocols. I want them back in hell within 2 hours. No exceptions. And if they request sanctuary extension. Denied. We're not running a shelter. This was a tactical exercise in defense parameters. Ainz paused. How did the princess respond? Poorly. In the manner we'd expect from someone whose worldview just collided with reality. Demiurge's satisfaction bled through. She's learning that good intentions don't change outcomes. See that she survives the lesson. She may prove useful later. Ainz walked to the throne room's viewing portal, looked out over his domain. Nazarick had functioned exactly as designed, absorbing assault, responding proportionally, maintaining security. But something nagged at him. In Yggdrasil, defeated raids meant loot and experience. Here it meant, what political complications? Future retaliation. He'd defended his territory successfully, but the implications extended beyond simple victory. This was how war started. Not with grand declarations, but with bodies counted and grudges nursed. Albedo. Increase perimeter monitoring. I want warning if heaven mobilizes again. You expect retaliation. I expect consequences. Ainz turned from the portal. We just killed angels during their sacred purge. That doesn't go unanswered. Then we prepare accordingly, Ainz-sama. We do. Bone fingers drummed once against the armrest. But quietly. Let them think we're satisfied with our demonstration. Pride makes people predictable. Deep in hell's bureaucratic halls, Lucifer Morningstar received the initial reports of extermination irregularities. An anomaly. Structural incursion. Heaven retreating early with unspecified casualties. Interesting. He made a note to investigate further. Not immediately rushing suggested concern, and he couldn't afford to look concerned. But eventually. because something had just shifted in Hell's power dynamics, and he needed to understand what. In Buffer Zone 7, Charlie stood as Solution announced their release. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for sheltering them." Solution's expression never changed. Protection was incidental to defense. Do not mistake tactical decisions for altruism. I won't. As they filed toward the exit, Sinner's Hazbin, crew all the refugees who'd survived by hiding in Nazarick's shadow. Charlie looked back once at the tomb's interior. Somewhere in there, people had died. Both angels and demons, both sides certain of their righteousness. And Nazarick had simply processed them. No rage, no triumph, just systems functioning as designed. She didn't know which scared her more, the killing or the casualness of it. The exit opened onto Hell's familiar chaos. The extermination had ended early, leaving confused survivors and empty streets. Charlie stepped back into her hell, carrying new knowledge she wished she didn't have. Sometimes salvation came with a body count, and sometimes the only difference between hero and monster was which side you stood on when the counting stopped. Behind them, Nazarick's doors closed. The tomb settled back into watchful silence, having delivered its lesson. War had come to Hell. Not the theatrical kind where overlords postured and territories shifted. The real kind, where choices had permanent consequences and nobody walked away clean. Chapter closed. New chapter pending. The game continued. The silence after battle carried weight that noise never could. Nazarick's halls stood empty of combat, cleaned of evidence. Where violence had erupted hours before, only polished stone remained. The tomb's maintenance systems worked with inhuman efficiency, erasing bloodstains and impact damage as if the fighting had never occurred. But it had. The absence of evidence didn't erase memory. In the outer ring staging area, Cocytus observed the final withdrawal patterns through tactical overlays. Heaven's forces retreated in good order. Wounded supported, dead carried, formations maintained despite the losses. Professional to the end. They learn quickly. He noted his clipped speech carrying something that might have been respect. Defeat does not break discipline. Albedo stood beside him, pristine as always, studying the same data with different eyes. Discipline without adaptation is merely stubbornness. They're withdrawing because they have no choice, not because they've learned the lesson. What lesson should they learn? That this territory answers to different authority now. That Hell's hierarchies have complications they didn't account for. Albedo dismissed the overlay with a gesture. But understanding takes time. For now, let them retreat with their dignity. It makes the humiliation more complete. Cocytus tilted his insectoid head fractionally. You enjoy this. I enjoy effective defense. The emotional satisfaction is incidental. Albedo's smile could have meant anything. Ainz Sama has called for final assessment. Shall we? They departed, leaving the outer ring to automated security. Behind them, the tomb settled into watchful readiness, not standing down, not celebrating, simply present. Above ground, Adam coordinated the retreat with mechanical precision. Medical teams triaged the wounded. Recovery squads searched for isolated stragglers. Command staff compiled casualty reports with numb efficiency. Everything by protocol, everything documented, everything processed through proper channels. Everything except the truth. Official count stands at 22 permanent casualties. Loot reported, voice carefully neutral. 31 wounded requiring extended recovery. 7 still missing, presumed captured or presumed casualties, Adam finished. Rounded to 30 total. Acceptable losses for a purge operation, encountering unexpected resistance. Sir, that's the report. Adam's tone allowed no argument. We engaged a fortified position of unknown origin, sustained moderate casualties, completed purge objectives in surrounding territories, withdrew on schedule. Lute stared at the falsified numbers at the narrative that turned disaster into acceptable metrics. They'll ask questions. Someone will want details. Let them ask. We encountered an anomaly. We contained it. We moved on. Standard operation. Adam's grip on his weapon never loosened. What we don't do is admit that something in hell made heaven bleed. So we lie. We protect morale. There's a difference. Lute didn't argue further. Arguing required believing words could change outcomes. And she'd stopped believing that around the time Mare Bello Fiore had buried 8 angels in stone while crying. The retreat continued in organized silence. No trumpets, no declarations. Just professional withdrawal from a battlefield that had stopped being simple the moment Nazarick appeared. In the throne room, the floor guardians assembled for final briefing. They came in their usual order. Albedo first always, Demiurge with his clipboard, Cocytus still radiating cold, the twins, Aura and Mare, staying close together. Shaltir vibrating with unused violence, Victim observing from his elevated position. Ainz surveyed them from his thrown bone fingers, steepled eye sockets burning with crimson light that betrayed no emotion. Status report. Demiurge stepped forward, consulting his notes with the kind of thoroughness that suggested he'd enjoyed compiling them. Combat operations concluded 16 minutes ago. Final count 29 confirmed enemy casualties, 7 detained pending interrogation, 43 wounded and released. Total enemy force engaged approximately 90 combatants. Nazarick casualties 0, infrastructure damage negligible. Guardian performance optimal. Cocytus maintained defensive perimeter without casualties. Mare neutralized command entity incursion with minimal collateral damage. Pleiades executed suppression protocols within established parameters. Demiurge made a notation. We operated at approximately 40% of full defensive capability. The implication hung clear. They'd won while barely trying. And our guests? Ainz's tone suggested he already knew the answer. Released 30 minutes ago through designated exit points. All refugees accounted for and returned to hell proper. No incidents during escort. Albedo's report came crisp and clinical. The Hellborn delegation appeared significantly affected by the experience, particularly the princess. Good. Ainz stood pacing slowly before his assembled command. This engagement served multiple purposes. Defense of our territory accomplished. Assessment of Heaven's capabilities completed. Demonstration of Nazarick's operational parameters successful. He stopped pacing, facing them directly. But understand this. We did not seek this conflict. We responded to incursion with measured force. That distinction matters. Shaltir raised one hand hesitantly. Ainz Sama, if I may. Why didn't we pursue? We could have eliminated their entire force, made them understand. They understand enough. Ainz's voice carried absolute finality. Overwhelming victory invites overwhelming response. We've demonstrated that Nazarick is not to be trifled with. Further escalation serves no strategic purpose. So we just let them leave? Shaltir sounded genuinely confused. We let them leave, carrying a message. Ainz resumed his throne, settling into its dark embrace. The message being, we could have killed more but chose not to. That restraint is more threatening than slaughter. It suggests resources held in reserve capabilities, not yet revealed. Demiurge's expression suggested deep appreciation. Strategic ambiguity. They'll spend months analyzing what we didn't do, preparing for threats we may not possess. Exactly. Ainz allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. In Yggdrasil, this would be the post-raid debrief where they'd analyze drops and experience. Here the spoils were information and positioning. Demiurge, prepare intelligence summary on enemy tactics and capability. Albedo, maintain elevated security posture for the next 72 hours. Cositus, review defensive protocols for potential improvements. Orders given, responsibilities assigned. The Guardians departed to their tasks, leaving Ainz alone with his thoughts. He'd won. Decisively. With minimal casualties and maximum demonstration of power. So why did victory feel like opening move rather than conclusion? Charlie walked through Hell's streets in a daze. The extermination had ended early, according to confused reports. Survivors emerged from hiding, checking for threats that had already withdrawn. The usual post-purge chaos spread through Pride Ring as sinners tried to assess who'd died and who'd survived. But something felt different. The survivors weren't celebrating. They were quiet, contemplative, as if sensing a shift in Hell's fundamental nature. "You okay?" Vaggie kept pace beside her, one hand ready on her spear despite the exorcists being long gone. "I don't know what okay means anymore." Charlie stopped walking, looking back toward where Nazarick had been. The tomb still stood unchanged, radiating presence like a mountain that had decided to take up residence in someone's backyard. "We survived. The sinners survived. But the cost," Vaggie finished. "Everyone keeps talking about costs. Heaven paid in casualties. We paid in. What innocence, the belief that there were clear sides." Charlie laughed, bitter and wrong. "I spent years thinking the problem was heaven's cruelty. That if we could just redeem enough sinners, prove they deserved better, everything would change. And now I know there are things worse than heaven's routine slaughter. There are systems that kill efficiently, powers that protect strategically, places that offer safety with terms and conditions that might cost more than dying." Charlie met Vaggie's eyes. Nazarick didn't save those sinners out of kindness. They used them, as bait, as data points, as tactical assets. But they did save them. Does that matter if the reasons were wrong? Vaggie considered, then shrugged. Ask the sinners who are alive to complain about it. They resumed walking. Behind them, Angel, Dust, and Husk followed at a distance, uncharacteristically quiet. Even Nifty had stopped her manic cleaning, settling into contemplative stillness. The Hazbin hotel crew had entered that tomb believing they understood power. They'd emerged knowing they understood nothing. "We need to talk to my dad," Charlie said finally. "If Nazarick is here, if it's that powerful, he needs to know. Hell needs to know." "You think Lucifer doesn't already?" Vaggie's skepticism showed. "Something that strong appears during an extermination and the king of hell doesn't notice. Then why hasn't he done anything? Maybe he's doing what we just learned to do. Watching, waiting, figuring out what the new power wants before deciding how to respond." Charlie hated that answer because it made sense. Her father had ruled hell for millennia. He understood power dynamics in ways her idealistic optimism had never permitted. Maybe it was time she learned. In his palace, Lucifer Morningstar reviewed reports with growing interest. Extermination concluded 6 hours early. Confirmed anomaly in Pride Ring. Heaven withdrew with unprecedented casualties, exact numbers classified, but his sources suggested double digits. Multiple overlords reporting strange fortification, impossible architecture entities of unknown origin. Well, he said to empty air smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Isn't this interesting? Lilith appeared from the shadows, because of course she did. You knew. I suspected. Something that changes Hell's power structure doesn't appear without warning. There are always signs. Lucifer dismissed the reports, turning to face his wife. The question isn't what it is. The question is what it wants. And it wants exactly what it demonstrated. To be left alone. To defend its territory. To operate by its own rules without interference. Lucifer's smile widened, which makes it either the most honest power in hell or the most sophisticated liar. You sound impressed. I am. Honesty and lying both require commitment. This Nazarick, he savored the name, rolling it across his tongue, committed fully to demonstrating capability without overextending. That's either brilliant strategy or profound restraint. Either way, it's valuable. Valuable how? As a counterweight. Heaven's gotten comfortable with their annual purges. They've treated hell like a problem to be managed, rather than a force to be respected. Lucifer's eyes glinted with something old and calculating. But if they just lost 30 angels to a tomb that appeared from nowhere, that comfort evaporates. That management becomes negotiation. You're thinking long-term. I'm always thinking long-term, dear. It's how one survives eternal existence. He turned back to the reports. Have someone send discreet inquiry to this Nazarick. Not a threat, not an alliance offer, just acknowledgement. Let them know Hell's leadership recognizes their sovereignty. And if they ignore it, then we know they truly want to be left alone, and we respect that. But if they respond, Lucifer's smile turned predatory. Then we have options. Night fell across Hell, though the distinction between day and night was mostly theoretical. The pride ring settled into its usual chaos. Deals made violence, traded power, consolidated. But something had shifted in the underlying current. The overlords felt it even if they couldn't articulate what. Hell had always operated on known quantities. Heaven's purges, Lucifer's distant rule, the hierarchy of demon nobles and sinners. Now there was an unknown. A power that had appeared, demonstrated absolute capability, and then stopped. Returned to watchful presence. That restraint terrified the smart ones more than violence would have. In Nazarick's throne room, Ainz stood alone on the balcony, overlooking his domain. Somewhere out there, Heaven nursed wounds and plotted responses. Hell adjusted to new realities. Charlie Morningstar questioned everything she'd believed. Adam fabricated reports to protect his pride. And Nazarick simply existed, present, powerful, patient. He defended his territory, protected his people, demonstrated capability without revealing limits. Everything a good ruler should do. So why did it feel like he'd just painted a target on everything he cared about? In Yggdrasil, other guilds had learned to leave Ainz Ooal alone through bitter experience. But this wasn't YGG Dracel. This was a world with its own politics, its own powers, its own incomprehensible rules. He'd won the battle. The war's opening moves had gone to Nazarick. But wars didn't end with opening moves. They escalated, adapted, found new ways to hurt what couldn't be broken by conventional force. Ainz Sama. Albedo's voice came from behind, hesitant in a way she rarely allowed herself. Yes. The perimeter is secure, all systems nominal. Guardian rotations established. She paused. Was there something else you required? Just thinking. Ainz turned from the viewbone, features unreadable. We did well today. We exceeded all projections. And yet, I can't shake the feeling we've started something we don't fully understand. He moved past her, heading back toward the throne. Maintain alert status. Something tells me this is far from over. As you command, Ainz. She departed, leaving him alone with his thoughts and his throne and his doubts that undead emotion suppression couldn't quite eliminate. Victory felt hollow when you couldn't celebrate it. When you knew that every display of strength invited stronger response. When you understood that showing the world you couldn't be beaten just made them want to find new ways to try. But Nazarick would stand ready. Because that's what fortresses did. They stood. They endured. They waited. And when the next challenge came, because it would come, they'd respond with the same measured precision that had turned an extermination into a lesson. Outside hell returned to its usual routines. Sinners rebuilt overlords, schemed the damned, continued their eternal sentences. But now they did it in the shadow of something new. Something that had proven heaven could bleed and hell's assumptions could shatter. The great tomb of Nazarick had arrived. And hell would never be the same. The game continued its pieces, rearranged its rules, questioned. New chapter pending, new moves required. The silence between rounds felt heavier than any battle. 3 days after the extermination that ended early, hell settled into uneasy normalcy. Sinners rebuilt their lives with the practiced efficiency of the perpetually damned. Overlords adjusted territories, filled power vacuums, conducted business as usual. The Pride Ring's eternal chaos resumed its familiar patterns. But the patterns had cracks now, invisible but present. In a bar that catered to mid-tier demons, 2 imps discussed rumor like currency. Heard Valentino lost 3 blocks near the anomaly. Just won't go near it. Can you blame him? Whole structure appeared from nowhere, ate an extermination, and heaven fucked off early. You believe that heaven cutting short because of some building? A pause. The kind loaded with things better left unsaid. My cousin saw it. Said angels went in and didn't come out. Said the ones who did looked like they'd seen something worse than hell. The conversation died there. Because what do you say to that? What do you do when the annual purge, the one constant, the predictable horror, becomes unpredictable? You drink. You rebuild. You don't look too closely at the tomb-shaped shadow that now occupied prime real estate in Pride Ring's heart. In Crimson Tower, Vox monitored feeds with unusual intensity. His screen showed everything: traffic patterns around Nazarick, overlord movements, sinner migration flows. The data painted pictures, and the pictures all said the same thing: fear. Not panic, not chaos. Just careful, calculated avoidance. A dead zone around the tomb that nobody explicitly acknowledged, but everyone respected. Fascinating, Vox murmured, switching feeds. A power structure that doesn't advertise, doesn't threaten, doesn't need to. Valentino appeared in his peripheral vision, unusually subdued. We making a move on what we don't even know what it is. It's territory. Territory means leverage. Territory means tombstone if we're wrong. Vox cut him off. Watch and learn, Val. That's what smart operators do when variables exceed data. Velvet entered with her usual dramatic flair, though even she seemed less certain than usual. The V's staying neutral. The V's are staying alive. Vox leaned back. Whatever that thing is, it made heaven bleed. We're entertainment demons, not suicide bombers. The conversation ended there. Not with decision, but with mutual understanding that some fights you watched from a distance. In heaven's administrative halls, the silence carried different weight. Sarah reviewed Adam's official report for the 3rd time, reading between sanitized lines. Acceptable casualties, unexpected resistance, tactical withdrawal on schedule. All technically true, all fundamentally dishonest. 22 confirmed, she said to empty air. Plus 7 missing presumed. You're calling that acceptable? Adam stood before her desk, wings, folded expression, unreadable. Compared to total loss, yes? Total loss was never a risk during routine purges. It wasn't routine. His voice stayed level through effort. We encountered fortified resistance of unknown origin, made tactical assessment, withdrew to prevent escalation, and the anomaly's current status. Still present, still fortified, no aggressive expansion observed. Adam met her eyes. We're monitoring. If it becomes a threat, we'll respond appropriately. Sarah studied him. The rigid posture, the controlled tone, the careful words that said everything by saying nothing. He'd lost people. More than the numbers suggested. Enough to shake even his arrogance. Recommendations. Observe, document. Don't engage unless provoked. Adam's jaw tightened. And if we do engage, send more than I had. The admission cost him. Sarah could see it in the way his hands clenched, the slight tremor he couldn't quite suppress. Very well. Maintain surveillance. No aggressive action without my direct authorization. Adam departed, leaving Sarah alone with reports that lied about casualties and truth that hurt worse than any battle wound. Heaven had always been untouchable, always above, always certain of divine right. Now they were just cautious. The shift felt seismic. In the Hazbin Hotel's rebuilt lobby, Charlie sat by the window, watching hell move. 3 days since they'd walked out of Nazarick's protection into familiar chaos. 3 days of trying to process what safety had actually cost. Vaggie entered quietly, 2 cups of something attempting to be tea. You've been here since dawn. Couldn't sleep. Charlie accepted the cup without drinking. Keep thinking about the refugees. They survived because we brought them to Nazarick, but we brought them to a place that killed angels like filing paperwork. Would you rather they died in the streets? I'd rather there was a third option that didn't involve choosing between slaughter and strategic protection. Charlie set down the untouched tea. I built this hotel on the idea that redemption was possible. That if we could just prove sinners deserved better, heaven would listen. And now I know heaven doesn't care about deserving. They care about control, about maintaining their purge schedule and their moral superiority. Charlie's voice went quiet. But Nazarick doesn't care about redemption either. They care about what territory resources, whatever calculations demons make. Vaggie settled beside her. Maybe they just care about being left alone. Nobody that powerful wants to be left alone. They want something. I just don't know what. Does it matter? They defended their territory, we survived, and now we move forward. Charlie looked at her girlfriend, practical, grounded, seeing the world through a soldier's eyes. How do you do that? How do you just accept it? Because I've seen what happens when you don't. Vaggie's hand found Charlie's. I was an exorcist, remember? I believed in heaven's righteousness until I didn't. Questioning didn't change anything except making me miserable. So what, I should stop questioning? No. Question everything. Just don't let the questions paralyze you. Vaggie squeezed her hand. Your hotel, your idea of redemption, it doesn't need heaven's approval or Nazarick's protection. It needs you to believe it's possible. Even if I'm wrong. Especially then. Because being wrong and trying is better than being right and doing nothing. Charlie absorbed that, turning it over in her mind. Through the window she could see the distant outline of Nazarick, still present, still watching. I'm going to keep trying, she said finally. but differently. Not for heaven's approval, not for anyone's approval, just because it's right. Now you're talking like a princess. I thought you didn't like royalty. I make exceptions for the ones who've earned it. Vaggie stood pulling Charlie up with her. Come on, we've got a hotel to run and sinners to maybe redeem. The world changed, but our work didn't. They moved toward the lobby where Angel was already harassing Husk. Nifty was cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, and Sir Pentious was explaining his latest invention to anyone who'd listen. Normal. Or Hell's version of it. But through it all, Charlie couldn't shake the feeling that they were all just pretending. That the real world had shifted and they were playing house in its ruins. Maybe that was okay. Maybe pretending was how you started rebuilding. In Nazarick's throne room, Ainz reviewed final assessments with Demiurge and Albedo. Heaven surveillance patterns remain consistent, Demiurge reported. Aerial observation at safe distance. No approach attempts. Communication intercepts suggest internal debate regarding response protocols. They're scared, Albedo noted with satisfaction. Good. They're cautious, Ainz corrected. Caution can become preparation. Maintain observation protocols. I want warning if their posture shifts. And Hell's reaction. Demiurge consulted his notes. Overlord territories have established informal exclusion zones around our perimeter. No direct contact attempts. Intelligence suggests significant rumor circulation, but no coordinated response. They're waiting to see what we do next. Ainz drummed bone fingers once. Which is nothing. We've established our position. Further action invites complication. Some might see inaction as weakness. Let them. We're not playing their game. Ainz stood pacing before his throne. In Yggdrasil, the greatest victories came from forcing opponents to come to us. We'll do the same here. And if they don't come, Albedo asked, then we've achieved exactly what we wanted. Territory secured, capabilities demonstrated, freedom to operate without interference. Ainz stopped pacing, turning to face them. We're not conquerors. We're administrators of our own domain. Demiurge's smile suggested deep appreciation. Strategic patience. How refreshing. It's practical. We don't know this world's full parameters yet. Every aggressive expansion is risk without guaranteed return. Ainz resumed his throne. Maintain defensive readiness, continue intelligence gathering, and otherwise. Business as usual. As you command, Ainz-sama. They departed, leaving Ainz alone with thoughts that wouldn't settle. He'd won. Territory secured enemies. Repelled position established. Everything a guild leader should achieve. But this wasn't a game anymore. There were no respawns, no log-out options, no dev team to patch exploits. Every decision had permanent consequences. Every action invited reaction. The cautious approach made sense strategically, but it left them isolated, reactive, waiting for threats they couldn't predict. Maybe that was the price of power. Maybe absolute security meant absolute solitude. Or maybe he was overthinking things again, and the simple answer was, they'd survived, they'd won, and now they watched to see what came next. Either way, Nazarick would endure, because that's what fortresses did. That evening, as Hell's perpetual twilight deepened toward full dark, Charlie stood on the Hazbin Hotel's roof. Below Pride Ring, sprawled in all its chaotic glory. Neon and flame screams, and laughter the eternal carnival of the damned. Same as always, but different, because now rising above the chaos like a monument to something beyond Hell's understanding. Nazarick stood watch. Not threatening, not expanding, just present. A reminder that power came in forms, heaven and hell hadn't anticipated, that rules could change, that certainty was illusion. Charlie thought about her hotel, her dream of redemption, her belief that sinners deserved better. Thought about how naive she'd been thinking kindness and hope could change millennia of established systems. But naive didn't mean wrong. It just meant incomplete. Heaven wouldn't help. Fine. She'd known that before, had just refused to accept it. Nazarick wouldn't save anyone for free. Also fine. Transactional protection was still protection. So what was left? What path remained when divine intervention was indifferent and demonic power was conditional? The one she'd been walking all along. The hard one. The one that required changing minds, not invoking authorities. The one that succeeded through persistence, not miracles. Her path. Third option. Neither heaven's judgment nor hell's calculations. Just redemption for its own sake, one sinner at a time, slowly building something that didn't require external validation. It would take longer than she'd hoped. Hurt more than she'd imagined. Require more compromise than she was comfortable with. But it was hers. And maybe that was enough. Vaggie joined her on the roof, silent presence in the dark. You okay? Getting there. Charlie pulled her close. I think I finally understand what you meant about the questions. Yeah, some things don't have answers. You just have to decide what you believe and act accordingly. Look at you being all philosophical. 3 days of existential crisis will do that. Charlie managed to smile. Come on, we've got work tomorrow. Serpentius wants to pitch another redemption exercise. Angel needs someone to stop him from propositioning the plants, and I think Nifty's building something concerning in the basement. Normal stuff. Our version of it. They descended, leaving the rooftop and its view of impossible architecture to the night. Below hell continued its eternal routine. Above heaven maintained its watchful distance, and between them, Nazarick stood as a reminder that all assumptions were temporary. The world had changed in ways nobody fully understood yet. But life, or whatever passed for it in hell, went on. Questions without answers. Power without precedent. Change without conclusion. And somewhere in that uncertainty space, enough for hope to survive. If you were stubborn enough to keep planting it. Charlie was. Vaggie knew she was. The hotel crew would follow because they had nowhere else to go, and surprisingly, no particular desire to leave. Not redemption yet. Not salvation. Just continuation. Sometimes that had to be enough. The tomb watched. The hotel stood. Heaven orbited at careful distance. Hell adjusted around the new architecture of its reality. And in the spaces between power and principle, between caution and courage, between what was and what might be. Life, imperfect and messy and stubbornly persistent, found ways to continue. The story didn't end. It just paused, waiting for whatever came next. 1 week after, the great tomb of Nazarick stood exactly where it had appeared, unchanged and unchanging. No expansion, no proclamation, no further demonstration of capability, just presence. Inside its depths, final administrative tasks proceeded with the same efficiency that had characterized everything else. Demiurge filed reports. Albedo updated security rotations. The Pleiades returned to their designated posts. Business as usual, as if nothing significant had occurred. In the throne room, Ainz reviewed the compiled intelligence one last time. Heaven maintains aerial observation at 2-kilometer minimum distance. Albedo reported, her tone suggesting satisfaction. No approach attempts. Communication intercepts indicate internal policy review regarding anomalous territories. Hell's response: territorial adjustments complete. Overlords have established informal exclusion protocols, no direct contact attempts. The refugees we released have interesting stories circulating. Albedo's smile sharpened. Most consider us demons. A few think we're something worse. None are entirely wrong. And our operational status: all systems optimal. Guardian rotations established. Resource consumption within sustainable parameters. She paused. We're fully operational for indefinite duration. Ainz nodded once. Then we've achieved primary objectives. Territory secured, capabilities demonstrated, freedom to operate confirmed. Shall we begin expansion protocols? No. The answer came immediate and absolute. We defend what we hold. We respond to threats. We do not initiate expansion. Ainz stood, bone hands clasped behind his back. Close the incident file. Log it as first contact event, successful defense standard protocols applied. Demiurge entered with his usual impeccable timing, carrying the final casualty and resource reports. Ainz, all metrics compiled. Shall I present summary? Summarize. 0 friendly casualties. Enemy losses within projected parameters. Resource expenditure negligible. Political impact substantial but contained. Demiurge's satisfaction bled through professional delivery. We've established deterrence without overextension, textbook execution. And the Princess the Hellborn delegation departed without incident. Initial tracking suggests they've returned to normal operations. Demiurge consulted his notes. Though normal may be relative, the princess appears to have internalized certain lessons. Good. Ainz returned to his throne. File everything. Standard archive protocols. We'll review in 3 months to assess long-term patterns. As you command, Ainz. They departed, leaving Ainz alone with the kind of victory that felt more like survival than triumph. He'd defended Nazarick, protected his people, demonstrated that this territory answered to different authority now. But he'd also painted a target, made enemies aware of his existence, invited future challenges from forces he didn't fully understand. In Yggdrasil, that would have been exciting. Here it was just concerning. Still, they'd survived first contact, established baseline protocols, proven the tomb's defenses worked against unknown threats. That had to count for something. Ainz allowed himself 1 moment of genuine relief, then activated the internal communication network. All personnel, stand down from combat status. Resume standard operations. This incident is closed. Across Nazarick, guardians and servants received the message and complied. The tomb settled into its new routine, watchful, ready but not actively hostile. A fortress doing what fortresses did best, existing as deterrent rather than weapon. In Heaven's council chambers, Sarah compiled the final assessment for records that would never be widely circulated. Extermination year 3847, concluded 6 hours ahead of schedule. Confirmed casualties 29, Angels permanent termination. Wounded 31, various severity. Missing 7, presumed terminated. Cause engagement with unknown fortified position of non-infernal origin. Recommendation: avoid territory. Maintain observation. Reassess threat level pending further intelligence. She signed the document with the weight of someone burying truth under bureaucratic language. Adam had lied in his official report. She'd known it the moment he'd submitted acceptable casualties instead of catastrophic losses. But calling him on it meant admitting Heaven had been beaten and admitting that open questions about divine authority she wasn't prepared to answer. Better to file it quietly. Mark the territory as hazardous. ensure future exterminations, gave it wide berth. Better to pretend the problem didn't exist than admit they'd found something they couldn't simply purge away. Sarah locked the file in archives, accessible only to council leadership, then returned to other matters. Heaven's work continued regardless of complications. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they'd lost more than angels that day. They'd lost certainty, the comfortable assumption that hell was theirs to judge. And once you lost certainty, everything else became negotiable. In Pride Ring, life returned to its usual chaos with the practiced ease of those accustomed to disruption. Sinners rebuilt, overlords adjusted, the eternal machinery of damnation ground forward. But conversations in bars and back alleys carried new undertones. Rumors of a place that had sheltered refugees during Purge. Stories of angels who went in and didn't come out. Whispers of something neither heaven nor hell could categorize. Most dismissed it as exaggeration. Some believed and stayed far away. A few, the desperate, the curious, the stupid, wondered if sanctuary might still be available. None approached to find out, because approaching meant admitting you needed protection, and admitting that meant acknowledging the annual purge wasn't just background noise anymore. It was survivable, with help. From something that didn't ask for worship or demand eternal service. Just terms and conditions. Clinical, fair, terrifying in its efficiency. The implications rippled through hell's social structure in ways nobody wanted to examine too closely. At the Hazbin Hotel, Charlie stood in the lobby looking at the guest book that still showed 0 successful redemptions. 1 week since Nazarick, 1 week since watching angels die and sinners survive, and learning that safety had price tags she'd never considered. "You're brooding again," Angel observed from the bar. "It's very princessy, but kinda depressing." "Just thinking." Charlie closed the book. "About what we're actually doing here. Redeeming sinners through love and kindness and whatever other greeting card bullshit you believe in." Husk poured something that might have been alcohol. "Same as always. But what if I'm wrong? What if redemption isn't possible through kindness? What if it requires..." She gestured vaguely toward where Nazarick stood in the distance. "Systems, rules, consequences." "Then you're in the wrong business, toots." Angel stretched all 4 arms, finding new lounging positions. "That tomb did what it did, 'cause it's built for it. Cold, efficient. Doesn't care who you are, just whether you follow protocol. And we're not. We're a fucking mess held together by your stubborn optimism and Vaggy's death glares." Angel's grin carried fondness despite the words. "Which is why some of us stick around. Because efficient systems don't give second chances to porn stars and gamblers and snake inventors." Charlie absorbed that, turning it over. "So you're saying Nazarick and the hotel serve different purposes?" "I'm saying you can't be everybody's savior, but you can be ours." Angel's rare moment of sincerity passed quickly. "Now stop philosophizing and help me convince Husk to smile. I got money riding on whether his face'll crack." The moment broke, returning to familiar chaos. Nifty zipped past, chasing imaginary dust. Serpentius demonstrated something involving too many gears. Vaggy coordinated repairs to structural damage with military precision. Normal. Their version of it. Charlie watched them, her crew, her family, her impossible project, and felt something settle in her chest. Nazarick had shown her that protection could be transactional. Heaven had proved judgment could be arbitrary. Hell demonstrated that survival often required compromise. But her hotel, her stubborn, ridiculous belief in redemption, that was hers. Flawed, inefficient, probably doomed to failure. But honest. personal, built on hope instead of protocol. Maybe that was enough. Maybe different solutions worked for different problems. Maybe the world needed both Nazarick's efficient deterrence and her messy compassion. The door opened. A sinner entered hesitantly, small-time demon rough edges, the look of someone who'd heard rumors and decided to gamble on kindness. I heard this place helps people. Nervous, uncertain. Is that true? Charlie felt Vaggie tense beside her, ready to assess threats. Felt the rest of the crew pause, waiting to see how she'd respond. 1 week ago, she would have welcomed him with speeches about redemption and second chances. Would have promised salvation through moral improvement. Now she just smiled, smaller, sadder, more honest. We try. No guarantees, no promises, just effort. She gestured to the guest book. Want to sign in? The sinner approached, cautiously signed with shaking hand. Looked at her with something between hope and suspicion. What's it cost? Trying to be better, that's all. Charlie's smile steadied. Everything else we figure out together. Not inspiring, not confident, just real. The sinner nodded slowly, not entirely convinced, but willing to stay. Small victory. Probably temporary. Definitely insignificant in Hell's grand scheme. But it was hers. In his palace, Lucifer Morningstar stood on a balcony overlooking Pride Ring. Somewhere out there, his daughter ran a hotel built on impossible optimism. Somewhere else, a tomb stood as monument to efficient power. Above heaven maintained its careful distance. 3 forces, 3 philosophies, 3 different answers to Hell's eternal question, what do you do with the damned? Heaven said, purge them periodically. Nazarick said, leave us alone and we'll return the favor. Charlie said, maybe they can be better. All 3 wrong in different ways. All 3 right in others. Lucifer smiled sharp and knowing. The game had gotten more interesting. Hell's comfortable stagnation had developed complications. Good. Stagnation led to complacency. Complications kept things dynamic. He'd watch, wait, see which approach survived contact with reality. His money was on none of them staying pure. Power corrupted idealism. Isolation invited aggression. Authority bred rebellion. But the collision, the way they'd adapt and change each other, that would be entertaining. He turned from the view, whistling something that might have been a lullaby or a dirge, and returned to his throne. Let the pieces move. Let the game develop. He had time, eternity really, and patience was its own form of power. Night settled across Hell, or whatever passed for night, in a realm of eternal twilight. The great tomb of Nazarick stood watch silent and absolute. The Hazbin Hotel's neon sign flickered to life, garish and defiant. Heaven's presence faded from the sky, maintaining distance that spoke volumes. 3 powers, 3 approaches, 3 futures intersecting in a realm that had never offered simple answers. Somewhere in Nazarick's depths, Ainz Ooal reviewed reports and planned for contingencies that might never arrive. Somewhere in the hotel's lobby, Charlie Morningstar welcomed sinners who probably couldn't be saved but deserved the attempt anyway. Somewhere in Heaven's halls, Sarah filed documents that buried uncomfortable truths under administrative language. None of them victorious. None of them defeated. Just existing in new equilibrium, their presence changing everything while resolving nothing. The extermination had ended early. Would return next year or wouldn't, depending on decisions not yet made. Nazarick would stand ready, defending its territory with the same clinical efficiency it brought to everything. Charlie would keep her doors open, offering redemption that probably didn't exist to people who probably didn't deserve it. and hell would continue being hell, chaotic, violent, eternal. But now, with the uncomfortable knowledge that the rules weren't quite as fixed as they'd seemed. No happy ending, no tragic conclusion, just continuation with all its messy uncertainty. The world had changed, not transformed, not revolutionized, just shifted, enough to notice, enough to matter, enough that nobody could pretend tomorrow would be the same as yesterday. And in that shift, in that small acknowledgement that change was possible even in hell, maybe that was hope enough. Charlie thought so, watching her impossible hotel glow against the darkness. Ainz would have disagreed, but he understood defense and deterrence, not optimism. Heaven remained silent on the question, which was answer enough. The story didn't end. It just found new place to pause, waiting for whatever came next, for tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. In hell's eternal present, that had to be enough. It was. That ending really puts things into perspective. Ainz is playing the ultimate long game. He is not going to invade, but he is just going to sit there and wait for everyone to realize that heaven and hell are bad at their jobs. It is kind of scary because he is right. Charlie's heart is in the right place, but she can't protect everyone from the purge. Ainz is basically saying that I will wait for you to beg me to rule you. It kinda literally turns Nazarick from a fortress into a waiting room for the end of the world. So what have we got here? Would you rather live in the chaos of hell or the perfect cold order of Ainz? I bet many of you choose the second option, ha. 2 weeks after the incident closed, Pride Ring had settled into rhythms that felt almost normal. Sinners navigated their eternal sentences. Overlords maintained territories. The Hazbin Hotel's neon sign burned bright against the perpetual twilight. Nazarick's gates remained sealed. No expansion, no communication, just presence, like a mountain that had decided cities should adjust around it, rather than the reverse. To outside observation, the anomaly had become background dangerous, yes, but static. A problem contained. Inside those sealed gates in a throne room built to impress gods, a different assessment was reaching conclusion. Ainz' Ooal gown sat motionless on his throne, skeletal fingers resting on ancient armrests. Before him stood only 2 albedo and demiurge. No other guardians, no ceremony, just leadership conducting final analysis. Compile, Ainz said simply. Demiurge consulted his notes with the thoroughness of someone who enjoyed data more than most enjoyed breathing. 2 weeks of observation across 3 primary power structures. Assessment complete. He activated a projection, not the detailed maps from combat operations, but something simpler, cleaner. A schematic showing relationships and vulnerabilities. Heaven maintains exclusive claim to moral authority. Response time to threats, 6 to 8 hours. Adaptation capability, minimal. Decision structure, hierarchical, slow. Confirmed weakness, pride prevents acknowledgement of limitations. Demiurge's tone carried no judgment, just observation. They will watch us. They will not engage unless provoked. Current threat level low. Ainz nodded once. Continue. Hell 7. Primary overlords estimated 43 secondary powers, uncounted tertiary operators. No unified governance. Power transitions occur through violence or deal-making. Confirmed weakness fragmentation prevents coordinated response to external threats. Demiurge made a notation. Multiple entities have adjusted territories around our perimeter. None have approached. Current threat level negligible. And the local metaphysical framework analyzed extensively during combat operations. Demiurge's satisfaction bled through professional delivery. This reality operates on established rules. Divine authority, infernal contracts, redemption mechanics, but lacks enforcement infrastructure. Heaven punishes periodically. Hell administers chaotically. No entity maintains systemic stability. World-class defenses. Ainz's question came sharp. None detected. No equivalent to YGG Drazel's high-tier protections. The strongest observed capabilities. Demiurge gestured to data points. Peak at what we'd classify as mid-tier threats. Dangerous to unprepared opponents, manageable with proper intelligence. Albedo spoke for the first time, her voice carrying weight. Ainz Sama, if I may summarize this realm, possesses power but lacks structure. Authority without administration. Rules without consistent enforcement. Your assessment? Ainz asked, though he suspected he knew. Vulnerable. She didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. The throne room settled into silence, broken only by the soft hum of magical infrastructure maintaining impossible architecture. Demiurge closed his primary report, opened a secondary file. Projection analysis. Hypothetical scenario: Nazarick implements territorial expansion using current resource allocation and observed threat parameters. Probability of success. Ainz's tone remained level. Conservative estimate 92% within first operational phase. Optimistic estimate approaches certainty. Demiurge met his master's glowing gaze. We could control this entire realm. Not through overwhelming force, though we possess that, but through superior administration. They're already half conquered by their own dysfunction. Ainz stood slowly, bone hands clasped behind his back, walked to the throne room's edge, looking out over internal architecture that had survived raid attempts by thousands. In Ouija Drazel, this would be post-raid analysis before planning the next conquest. Resources acquired, enemies assessed, expansion routes mapped. But this wasn't YGG Drazel. This was real. Permanent. Consequences stayed permanent. No, he said quietly. Albedo's confusion showed fractionally. Ainz Sama, not yet. Ainz turned back to face them. This realm just experienced systemic shock. Heaven lost certainty. Hell gained complications. The balance shifted. Moving now destabilizes what could be exploited later. Exploit how? Demiurge asked, already following the logic, but wanting confirmation. When systems fail repeatedly, populations seek alternatives. Currently, they fear us. Fear maintains distance. Ainz resumed his throne, settling into its dark embrace. But if local authority continues failing, if heaven's purges become unbearable, if hell's chaos grows intolerable, then fear becomes desperation. And desperate populations request intervention. Understanding dawned in Demiurge's expression. We wouldn't conquer. We'd be invited. We'd be necessary. Ainz's tone carried absolute certainty. Right now we're an anomaly, a problem to avoid. But problems that solve other problems stop being threats. They become solutions. Albedo absorbed this, calculating implications. How long? As long as required. We've established that we can take this realm if needed. That's sufficient for now. Ainz drummed bone fingers once against the armrest. Monitor local governance patterns. Document failures. When the existing order proves inadequate to protect its own people, we'll have justification beyond simple capability. And if they adapt, if the princess succeeds in her redemption project or heaven reforms its methods? Demiurge's question carried genuine curiosity. Then this realm achieves stability through its own systems, and we remain neighbors rather than administrators. Ainz paused. I'd prefer that outcome. Conquest is resource-intensive. Voluntary integration is efficient. The statement hung in the air, carrying implications none of them needed to voice. Nazarick didn't need to invade. It just needed to be patient while watching others fail. New protocols, Ainz ordered. Continue intelligence gathering. Document instances of systemic failure, heaven's casualties from purges, hell's inability to protect populations, authority vacuums that destabilize territories. Build a record. A record of their inadequacy, Albedo said slowly. To justify future involvement. To demonstrate that if we do act, it's because alternatives exhausted themselves. Ainz's eye sockets burned with cold crimson light. When a realm cannot govern itself effectively, external administration isn't invasion. It's inevitability. Demiurge bowed, smile sharp with appreciation. Strategic patience. We let them fail, document the failure, then arrive as solution rather than problem. Exactly. Ainz gestured dismissal. File everything under long-term assessment. Maintain defensive posture. No aggressive expansion. We have time. They departed, leaving Ainz alone with thoughts that refused to settle despite undead emotion suppression. He defended successfully, established deterrence, positioned Nazarick as power beyond local hierarchies. But he'd also seen how fragile this realm's systems were, how close to collapse, how desperately populations needed protection that existing authorities couldn't or wouldn't provide consistently. Heaven killed efficiently, but indiscriminately. Hell offered no safety, just varying degrees of exploitation. And the princess's hotel, noble as the effort was, couldn't scale to populations measured in millions. Someone would need to impose order, eventually. Someone capable of defending populations against both divine purges and infernal chaos. Someone with resources and will to actually maintain stability. Why not Nazarick? They had capability, infrastructure, experience maintaining fortress cities in hostile territory. And unlike heaven or hell's overlords, they didn't pretend to care about morality. Just results. If this realm needs a ruler, Ainz thought bone fingers drumming slow rhythm against ancient stone. At least it would have an effective one. The thought should have felt wrong. Presumptuous. Like something a villain would think before making catastrophic mistakes. But villains usually wanted to rule for power's sake, for ego, for the thrill of conquest. Ainz wanted it because the alternative, watching capable defenses sit idle while populations suffered inadequate protection, felt like waste. Strategic waste. Moral waste, if such considerations even applied to the undead. Nazarick had proven it could defend territory, could protect those within its boundaries according to established protocols. The question wasn't whether they could rule this realm. The question was, when local systems failed badly enough that even their own people preferred efficient tyranny to chaotic freedom, would Nazarick be ready to provide that alternative? Ainz stood again, walked to the viewing portal, showing Pride Ring's distant chaos. Somewhere out there, Charlie Morningstar worked on her impossible project. Heaven maintained its careful distance. Hell continued its eternal dysfunction. 3 systems, 3 failures from different angles, and 1 fortress watching, waiting, documenting. Not because conquest was desired, because order apparently was optional everywhere except inside these walls. The decision wasn't to invade. The decision was to be ready when invitation came, because it would come. Systems this broken always collapsed eventually. And when they did, Nazarick would be positioned not as conqueror, but as the only entity capable of preventing total chaos. Strategic, efficient, justifiable. Exactly how Ainz Ooal approached everything. He turned from the viewing portal, returned to his throne, and activated the final command of the incident log. Assessment complete. Incident closed. Long-term monitoring protocols active. Expansion authorization conditional on systemic failure of local governance. The log accepted his input, filed it under strategic archives, marked the decision with timestamp and certainty. Somewhere in Pride Ring, Charlie welcomed another sinner with hope that probably wouldn't save them. Somewhere in heaven, Sarah maintained surveillance on territory they couldn't categorize. Somewhere in hell, overlords avoided the tomb-shaped shadow and pretended normalcy. And inside, Nazarick systems designed to conquer worlds settled into watchful patience. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. Because efficiency always outlasted chaos. And chaos, apparently, was all this realm knew how to produce. The tomb waited. The realm failed. And Ainz Ooal documented everything. For when the time came, if it came, when it came, the game continued. New phase, new patience, same inevitable conclusion. Just a matter of time.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to turn on notification so you won't miss our future video. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.